I caught my wife unbuttoning my daughter's fiancé's shirt 3 days before the wedding. I was ready to kick the door down, ready to shatter his jaw and throw her out onto the street, but a cold hand clamped over my mouth from the shadows. I turned, expecting to see a security guard, but it was my daughter, Jasmine. She wasn't crying, she wasn't shaking. She looked at me with eyes that were terrifyingly dry and whispered, "Dad, stop." I already knew, and it is so much worse than you think. I am Clifford Robinson, 68 years old, and I have spent my entire life building things that are supposed to last. I started as a bricklayer in Detroit with nothing but callous hands and a back that refused to break. Over 40 years, I built a construction empire from the ground up. I know how to pour a foundation that can withstand an earthquake. I know how to spot a structural crack before the ceiling collapses. But as I stood in the hallway of my own $10 million mansion, clutching my chest, I realized I had built my own life on quicksand. My home, this sprawling estate of gray stone and imported marble, was never a home. It was just a very expensive cage where I kept the people who were waiting for me to die. Before I tell you how I tore it all down, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever realized that the people closest to you were the ones holding the knife. The engagement party was in full swing in the grand ballroom. The air smelled of expensive perfume, roast beef, and hypocrisy. There were 200 guests, most of whom I barely recognized. They were friends of my wife, Sylvia, or business associates of my future son-in-law, Blake. They drank my vintage champagne and laughed with their heads thrown back, their teeth gleaming under the crystal chandeliers I had paid for. I stood near the massive fireplace, holding a glass of sparkling water, feeling like a stranger at my own funeral. Sylvia was working the room, looking stunning in a silver gown that clung to her body a little too tightly for a woman of 55. She was smiling, touching arms, laughing that practiced laugh that used to charm me, but now just sounded like scratching on a chalkboard. She was playing the role of the devoted matriarch perfectly. My chest gave a painful throb. It wasn't a heart attack, not yet, but it was a warning. My doctor had told me to avoid stress, to take my medication, to slow down. But how do you slow down when you are surrounded by sharks? I patted my pocket for my nitroglycerin pills, but they weren't there. I must have left them on the nightstand in the master suite. I needed to get away from the noise anyway. The bass from the DJ booth was vibrating in my rib cage, matching the erratic rhythm of my heart. I set my glass down on a marble coaster and slipped out of the ballroom. No one noticed I was leaving. I was just the wallet that funded the party, not the guest of honor. The hallway leading to the family wing was dark and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the party. The carpet was thick, swallowing the sound of my footsteps. I walked slowly, breathing through the tightness in my chest. I passed the portraits hanging on the wall. Me and my first wife, Jasmine's mother, on our honeymoon in Jamaica. She was the only woman who ever loved me when I was dusty and broke. Then a picture of Jasmine at her college graduation, looking proud and fierce. And finally, the recent photos. Me and Sylvia, me and Blake. Photos where my smile didn't quite reach my eyes. I reached the double doors of the master suite. They were slightly ajar. I frowned. I always kept them closed during parties. I reached out to push the door open, but a sound stopped me. It was a giggle, a low, husky giggle that I knew intimately. It was Sylvia. Then a man's voice, smooth and arrogant. "You are bad, Sylvia. What if the old man comes upstairs?" My hand froze on the brass handle. That was Blake, my daughter's fiancé. The man who was supposed to marry Jasmine in 72 hours. The man who had shaken my hand 2 hours ago and thanked me for welcoming him into the family. I shouldn't have looked. A wiser man would have turned around, gone back to the party, and pretended he didn't hear. But I am not a wise man. I am a builder. I need to see the damage with my own eyes. I pushed the door open just an inch, peering through the crack into the dressing room area of the suite. The light in the dressing room was dim, but I saw them clearly, too clearly. Sylvia was backed up against the mirrored wardrobe, her silver dress hiked up her thighs. Blake was standing between her legs, his hands not on her waist, but sliding possessively under the bodice of her dress. He wasn't kissing her like a son-in-law kisses a mother-in-law. He was devouring her. It was hungry, nasty, and comfortable. They had done this before, many times. I felt a physical blow to my gut, harder than any punch I had ever taken on a construction site. My vision blurred, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, the pain radiating down my left arm. I watched as Blake pulled away, breathless, a smirk plastered on his handsome face. "You worry too much," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Clifford is probably downstairs writing a check to the caterer or dozing off in a corner. The old man has no clue." Sylvia ran her fingers through Blake's hair, a look of twisted adoration on her face that made my stomach turn. "We have to be careful, honey. Just a few more days. Once the wedding is over and the papers are signed, we are safe." "Safe?" Blake scoffed. "We are already safe. Have you seen him lately? He looks like a walking corpse. I give him 6 months, tops, especially with the new medication you are giving him. He won't survive the honeymoon night, let alone the first year." Sylvia laughed, a cruel, cold sound. "Don't say that. I need him to last long enough to update the trust fund transfer. Then he can have his heart attack." I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just adultery. This wasn't just a betrayal of my daughter. This was a conspiracy. They were talking about my death as if it were a business transaction, a calendar event to be managed. The rage that surged through me was hot and blinding. I forgot the pain in my chest. I forgot the pills. All I wanted was to burst into that room and tear Blake apart with my bare hands. I wanted to see the fear in Sylvia's eyes when she realized the meal ticket was fighting back. I gripped the door handle, my knuckles turning white. I took a deep breath, preparing to kick the door open and end this charade right now. I was going to ruin them. I was going to destroy their lives in front of every guest downstairs. But just as I shifted my weight to lunge forward, a hand grabbed my wrist. It was a strong grip, surprising for such slender fingers. Another hand clamped firmly over my mouth, stifling the roar of anger that was rising in my throat. I was yanked back into the shadows of the hallway with a force that made me stumble. I spun around, fists raised, ready to strike whoever dared to stop me. It was Jasmine, my beautiful, intelligent Jasmine. She was wearing her emerald green maid of honor dress, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, but her face was a mask of stone. There were no tears, no shock, no trembling lips. She looked at me with an intensity that chilled my blood. She pressed a finger to her lips, her eyes darting toward the crack in the door, where her fiancé was currently groping her stepmother. "Shh," she hissed, barely audible. "Do not make a sound." I stared at her, my mind reeling. I pulled her hand away from my mouth, my voice shaking with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. "Jasmine, did you see? Did you hear them? Your mother and that animal. They are in there. I know." She cut me off. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "I have known for 3 months." I stared at her, stunned. "You knew? And you are still marrying him? You are letting them humiliate you. Jasmine, move out of my way. I am going to kill him." "No, you are not," she said, tightening her grip on my arm. Her fingernails dug into my suit jacket. "If you go in there now, you blow everything. You give them a chance to spin the story. Sylvia will claim you are having a dementia episode. Blake will say he was helping her with a zipper. They will gaslight you, Dad. And with your heart condition, the stress of a public fight tonight might actually kill you, just like they want." I looked back at the door. The murmurs and giggles were still coming from inside. My stomach churned. "So what do we do?" I whispered hoarsely. "We just let them do this? We let them laugh at us?" Jasmine's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw something dark flicker in them. It wasn't sadness, it was hate. Pure, cold, calculated hate. "We don't do anything tonight," she said. "We go back downstairs. We smile. We cut the cake. You give a toast welcoming Blake to the family." "Are you insane?" I hissed. "I can't look at him without vomiting." "You have to," she said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "Because if they think they are safe, they get sloppy. You think this is just about them sleeping together? Dad, you have no idea. I have recordings. I have bank statements. I am not the victim here, Dad. I am the one holding the shovel." She stepped closer, her face inches from mine. "I am not letting them humiliate me. I am letting them dig their own graves. But I need you to be alive to see them fall in. So, take your hand off that door handle, fix your tie, and come downstairs." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. I realized then that I didn't know her at all. I had raised a princess, but somewhere along the way, she had become a warlord. "It is worse than you think, Dad," she whispered, pulling me away from the door. Now walk, and don't look back. I let her lead me away from the bedroom, away from the sounds of my wife betraying me. My heart was still pounding, but the rhythm had changed. It was no longer the drumbeat of panic. It was the slow, steady march of war. I wiped a bead of sweat from my forehead, straightened my jacket, and prepared to give the performance of a lifetime. I didn't know it yet, but the stone mansion was about to become a battlefield, and the wedding in 3 days wouldn't be a celebration. It would be an execution. The heavy oak door of my private study clicked shut, sealing us inside. I have built skyscrapers less complicated than the mess you are in right now. She set the glass down. You think I am blind, Dad. You think because I grew up with money, I am soft. But I am your daughter. I pay attention to details. She crossed her arms over her chest. I found out about Blake and Sylvia 3 months ago. I came home early from the trip to Cabo. I saw his car in the driveway. I saw them by the pool. My stomach churned. You saw them. And you stayed? You are still marrying him? It is not about love, Dad, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It is about leverage. Blake is broke. He is not a tech entrepreneur. He is a glorified gambler with a mountain of debt. And Sylvia? She is greedy. She knows the prenup you made her sign gives her nothing if she cheats. But if you die, she gets 1/3 of the estate. I felt the blood drain from my face. I sat down heavily in my leather armchair. So that is it. They are waiting for me to die. Jasmine nodded slowly. They are not just waiting. They are impatient. That is why I need this wedding to happen. I have a private investigator building a case. I need them to think they have won. I need Blake to sign the marriage license. Once he does, his debts become community property, but not mine. I have structured a holding company that absorbs his liabilities. And once I have the proof of their affair after the marriage, I can annul it on grounds of fraud, expose Sylvia for adultery, to void her claim on your estate, and we walk away clean. I looked at her, searching for the truth in her face. It sounded logical. It sounded like a business deal. But there was something missing. Where was the hurt? Where was the betrayal? She was talking about destroying 2 people's lives as if she were discussing a zoning permit. You are playing a dangerous game, girl, I said. You are letting a wolf into the henhouse hoping you can shoot him before he eats the chickens. I am the wolf, Dad, she said flatly. They are the sheep. I just need you to play your part. Go back out there, shake his hand, smile at Sylvia, be the proud father. If you show even a crack in the foundation, they will panic. And desperate people do dangerous things. I looked at my hands. They were rough, scarred from years of laying bricks. I had built this life to protect her, and now she was asking me to use it as a weapon. I didn't know if I believed her entirely. There was a hardness in her I had never seen before. Had I created this? Had my obsession with success taught her that winning was more important than dignity? Fine, I said, standing up. I will play your game. But if I smell even a whiff of a lie, Jasmine, I am burning this whole house down. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You won't have to. Now fix your face. It is showtime. Walking back into that party was the hardest thing I have ever done, and I have buried parents. I have buried a wife. But walking down that hallway, knowing I was returning to a room full of people who were either laughing at me or plotting my death, required a strength I wasn't sure I had left. The music hit me first, a loud, rhythmic thumping that seemed to mock the erratic beating of my own heart. I stepped into the ballroom, and the light from the crystal chandeliers assaulted my eyes. It was a sea of expensive tuxedos and designer gowns. Waiters moved through the crowd with silver trays of champagne and caviar. It was a scene of perfect, opulent happiness, and it made me want to vomit. I saw Sylvia immediately. She was near the center of the room, holding court with the mayor's wife. She threw her head back and laughed at something, her hand resting casually on the arm of a man she barely knew. She looked radiant, beautiful, and completely rotten. I remembered the first time I saw her, 15 years ago. She was a hostess at a charity gala. I thought she was the most elegant woman in the world. I didn't see the hunger in her eyes then. I only saw the smile. Now, watching her, I wondered how many times she had laughed like that while thinking about how much I was worth dead. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt tight, like a mask made of dried clay. I walked into the crowd, nodding to people I had known for decades. "Clifford, "You look fantastic," shouted Tom, a real estate developer I had done business with in the 90s. I shook his hand. "Thanks, Tom. Just trying to keep up with the young ones." Liar. I felt like a corpse walking. Every handshake felt slimy. Every pat on the back felt like a knife being measured for my spine. I made my way toward the bar, needing something to wash the taste of bile from my mouth. And then I saw him. Blake was standing near the DJ booth, holding a glass of scotch. He was surrounded by his groomsmen, a pack of young, loud men who looked like they had never done a day of hard labor in their lives. Blake looked like a prince, tall, blonde, with a jawline that could cut glass. He was laughing, looking around the room with an air of ownership. He wasn't looking at the guests. He was looking at the furniture, the art on the walls, the marble columns. He was appraising his inheritance. I felt a surge of rage so hot it nearly blinded me. I wanted to grab the nearest bottle and smash it over his head. I wanted to roar the truth until the windows shattered. But I heard Jasmine's voice in my head. "I am the wolf. They are the sheep." I took a deep breath, pushing the anger down into the pit of my stomach where it burned like acid. I walked straight toward him. Blake saw me coming. For a split second, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Good. He wasn't as confident as he pretended to be. But he masked it quickly, replacing it with that charming, slick smile that had fooled me for a year. "Clifford," he boomed, stepping forward with his arms open. "The man of the hour. We were just talking about you." I bet you were, I thought, discussing my expiration date. I took his hand. His grip was firm, aggressive. He tried to squeeze my hand, a subtle power play. I squeezed back. I might be 68 with a bad heart, but I have hands that have bent steel rebar. I felt his knuckles grind together. His smile faltered just a fraction. "Good to see you, son," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Enjoying the party?" "It is incredible, sir," he said, pulling his hand back and rubbing it discreetly against his pant leg. "You really outdid yourself. Sylvia has amazing taste." "Yes, she does," I said, holding his gaze. "She always knows exactly what she wants. And she usually gets it." He laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "That is very true." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy, too heavy. It wasn't a gesture of affection, it was a gesture of containment, like a handler calming a horse before leading it to the glue factory. "You know, Clifford," he said, lowering his voice so only I could hear. The music thumped around us, creating a bubble of privacy. "I really appreciate everything you were doing. Not just the money, but trusting me with Jasmine, and with the business. I know you were tired. You have worked hard your whole life." He leaned in, his cologne smelling of musk and arrogance. His eyes were ice blue, void of any warmth. "You deserve a rest," he whispered. "A long, permanent rest. Let us young people take the burden off your shoulders. We can handle it from here." My blood ran cold. It wasn't a threat I could report to the police. It was phrased as concern, but the menace in his tone was unmistakable. He was telling me that my time was up. He was telling me that he was the new king of the castle, and I was just the old ghost haunting the hallways. I looked at him, really looked at him. This wasn't just a gold digger. This was a predator, a man who enjoyed the kill as much as the feast. I looked across the room. Jasmine was standing by the entrance, watching us. Her face was unreadable. She gave a microscopic nod. Was she signaling me to stay calm, or was she signaling him? A terrible thought took root in my mind. What if Jasmine wasn't trapping them? What if that story in the study was just another layer of the lie? What if she was the one who sent him over here to taunt me, to push my blood pressure up, to trigger the heart attack they were all waiting for? I looked back at Blake. He patted my shoulder one last time, a hard, condescending slap. "Go sit down, Clifford," he said, smiling with his teeth. "You look a little pale. We wouldn't want you to miss the big day." He turned back to his friends, dismissing me as if I were a servant. I turned and walked away. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through wet concrete. I needed to get out of this room. I needed air. But more than that, I needed the truth. Jasmine's story had holes in it. Blake's confidence was too high for a man who was being led into a trap. I made my way to the French doors that led to the terrace. The cool night air hit my face, but it didn't cool the fire in my veins. I looked back through the glass. I saw my wife. I saw my daughter. I saw my future son-in-law. 3 people who claimed to love me. And I realized, with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating, that I was completely alone. I touched the pocket of my jacket. I felt the outline of my phone. I needed to make a call. Not to the police, not yet. I needed someone who knew how to dig through dirt without getting messy. I needed Harold. I pulled the phone out, my fingers trembling slightly. I dialed the number. "Pick up, Harold," I whispered, watching Blake laugh inside the ballroom. "Pick up, because I think I am the only one in this house who doesn't know the script to this play, and I have a feeling the final act involves my funeral." The last guest finally left at 2 in the morning. The heavy oak front door clicked shut, locking out the noise of the world, but locking me inside with the silence of the grave. The house smelled of stale champagne and dying flowers. The catering staff had cleared away the glasses and the plates, wiping down surfaces until they gleamed, erasing every trace of the celebration. It was as if the party never happened, just like my marriage, just like the life I thought I had built. I stood in the foyer, loosening my tie. My chest still felt tight, a dull ache that radiated into my shoulder. I told myself it was just stress. It had to be stress, because if it was my heart failing, then they would win, and I was not ready to let them win. Upstairs, the house was quiet. Sylvia had gone to bed an hour ago, complaining of a migraine, a convenient excuse to avoid talking to me. Jasmine had left with Blake, probably to celebrate their successful performance as the happy couple. I was alone. Truly alone in a 10,000 square foot mausoleum. I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline from the encounter in the hallway was still pumping through my veins, mixing with the fear that Jasmine's plan was too fragile to work. I needed a place to think, a place where the air was honest. I walked down the long corridor to the heavy steel fire door that led to the garage. This was my real sanctuary. It wasn't the library with its unread books, or the living room with its uncomfortable Italian sofas. It was here, the garage. The fluorescent lights flickered on with a hum, illuminating the concrete floor. It was cleaner than the kitchen. I walked past the gleaming black Mercedes S-Class, the car Sylvia insisted on buying but never drove because she preferred the chauffeur. I walked past Jasmine's white Range Rover, and I stopped in front of my pride and joy, my 1969 Mustang Fastback. I had restored it myself, piece by piece, bolt by bolt. It was the only thing in this house that I truly owned, the only thing that didn't lie to me. I ran my hand over the cold metal of the hood. Cars are simple. If an engine knocks, it tells you something is broken. If the brakes squeal, they need replacing. People are not like that. People smile while they hold a knife behind their back. I walked over to the workbench in the corner. It was covered in tools, organized with military precision. Behind a row of oil cans, hidden from view, was a small black monitor. Sylvia thought I was just an old man who liked to tinker with engines. She didn't know that 3 years ago, when cash started disappearing from my wallet and odd cars started parking down the street, I had installed a closed-circuit camera system. Not in the house. Sylvia would have found those. She was too nosy. I installed them here, in the garage. Because the garage is where people think they are safe. It is where they drop their guard before they enter the house. It is where they make phone calls they don't want anyone to hear. I pulled up the stool and sat down. My joints popped. I felt every year of my 68 years tonight. I woke the system up. The screen glowed blue, casting a ghostly light on my face. I didn't want to watch live footage. The garage was empty now. I needed to see the past. I began to scroll back through the timeline. Yesterday, the day before. I stopped at a timestamp from 48 hours ago. Tuesday afternoon, 2 p.m. I saw Sylvia's car pull in. She got out, looking around nervously. She wasn't wearing her usual socialite mask. She looked hard, predatory. Then, a second car pulled in. Blake's Porsche. I leaned closer to the screen. My heart began to hammer against my ribs again. They stood between the cars. They didn't kiss. This wasn't a lover's rendezvous. Their body language was tense, urgent. Blake was pacing back and forth, waving his hands. Sylvia was standing still, arms crossed, her face like stone. I turned up the volume. The microphone I had hidden near the ventilation duct picked up their voices clearly over the hum of the refrigerator. "You are taking too long, Sylvia," Blake said. His voice was sharp, lacking the smooth charm he used at the dinner table. "The loan sharks are giving me until the end of the month. If I don't pay the interest, they start breaking fingers." "Keep your voice down," Sylvia hissed. She opened her purse. She pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. It wasn't my usual pharmacy bottle. It had no label. "Here," she said, thrusting the bottle at him. I switched the supplier. The last batch was too weak. He was just getting dizzy. "These are different." Blake took the bottle, holding it up to the light. "What are they?" Sylvia smiled. It was the ugliest smile I had ever seen. It was a smile void of humanity. "It is a mix," she said. "Antipsychotics and a high dose of sedatives. But the chemist said if he takes 2 of these a day, mixed with his heart medication, it creates a chemical reaction. It restricts blood flow to the frontal lobe." Blake looked at the bottle, then at her. "What does that mean in English?" "It means," Sylvia said, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like a gunshot in the empty garage, "that in 3 weeks, he won't just be tired. He will be confused. He will forget names. He will forget where he is, and eventually, his brain will turn to mush. We won't have to kill him, Blake. We won't have to stage an accident. He will simply lose his mind. And then I get power of attorney. I get the conservatorship, and we put him in a home where he can rot while we spend the money." I froze. The air in the garage seemed to vanish. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't adultery. This wasn't just greed. This was murder. They were planning to erase me. They didn't want to stop my heart. They wanted to erase my mind. They wanted to turn me into a vegetable so they could pick my pockets while I sat in a wheelchair drooling on myself. I watched Blake pocket the pills. He laughed. "You are wicked, Sylvia. I love it. So when do we start?" "I started this morning," Sylvia said. "I put the first one in his vitamin case. He swallowed it with his orange juice. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. I remembered breakfast. I remembered the orange juice tasting slightly bitter. I had thought the fruit was just turning. I shut off the monitor. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely stand up. I wasn't just an old man dealing with a cheating wife anymore. I was a victim of poisoning. I was a man living with his executioners. I had to be sure. I had to know if Jasmine was right, or if I was already dying. I left the garage. I moved through the house like a ghost. I climbed the stairs, placing my feet carefully on the edges of the steps to avoid the creaks. I reached the door of the master bedroom. I pushed it open. The room was dark, lit only by the moonlight filtering through the curtains. I heard the rhythmic breathing of my wife. She was sleeping soundly, sleeping the sleep of the innocent, or the sleep of the sociopath. I crept toward the nightstand on my side of the bed. My heart was pounding so loud I was terrified she would hear it. There it was, my daily pill organizer. I picked it up. My hands were trembling. I opened the compartment for tomorrow morning, Wednesday. Inside, nestled among my usual white blood pressure pills and the yellow vitamin, was a blue pill. It looked almost exactly like my nitroglycerin heart medication. Almost. But I have been in construction for 40 years. I know materials. I know that different batches of concrete have different textures. I know that steel has a specific sheen. I reached into the hidden pocket of my wallet. I always kept an emergency stash of my real heart medication there, a habit from my days working on remote sites. I pulled out a real pill. I held them side by side in the moonlight. The real pill was glossy, with a tiny engraved number on the side. The pill from the organizer was matte. It was slightly chalky, and it had no number. I raised the fake pill to my nose. It smelled faintly of almonds and chemicals. My real medicine had no smell. The realization hit me with the force of a wrecking ball. Jasmine was right about the plot, but she was wrong about the timeline. They weren't waiting for the wedding. They were actively killing me now. Every day I stayed in this house, every meal I ate, every glass of water I drank, was a game of Russian roulette. I looked at Sylvia's sleeping form. I had the urge to grab a pillow and smother her, to end it right now, to make her pay for the poison she had fed me with a smile. But I stopped myself. If I killed her, I went to jail. And Blake would get everything. Jasmine would be left with nothing. No, that was too easy for them. I put the fake pill in my pocket. This was evidence. This was my weapon. I put the real pill back in my wallet and placed the organizer back on the nightstand, exactly as I had found it. I backed out of the room, my eyes never leaving my wife. I went downstairs to the kitchen. I poured the rest of the orange juice down the sink. Then I went to the pantry and opened a sealed can of peaches. I ate them quickly, ravenously. It was the only food I could trust. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the darkness. They wanted to turn my brain to mush? Fine. Let them think it was working. I would play the part. I would be the confused old man. I would stumble. I would forget names. I would let them think the poison was taking hold. Because a confused enemy is an underestimated enemy, and an underestimated enemy is the most dangerous kind. I took out my phone. I didn't call the police. I sent a text message to Harold, my lawyer. Meet me at the diner on 4th Street, 6 a.m. Come alone, and bring the audio recorder. I deleted the message. Then I sat in the dark and waited for the sun to rise. I was Clifford Robinson. I had built skyscrapers on swampland. I had survived riots and recessions. I wasn't going to let a gold-digging boy and a treacherous wife take me down with a blue pill. The war had just begun, and I was going to bring the whole house down on top of them. The sound of silver scraping against fine china is usually the sound of civilization. Tonight it sounded like scalpels sharpening against bone. We were sitting at the long mahogany table in the formal dining room, a table I had custom-made from a single slab of reclaimed timber 20 years ago. It was solid. It was heavy. It was built to host Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas breakfasts. Now it felt like an autopsy slab. I sat at the head of the table. Sylvia was to my right. Blake was to my left. Jasmine was opposite me, the four corners of a collapsing structure. The air conditioner was humming, but the room felt stiflingly hot. Or maybe that was just the rage boiling under my skin. I looked down at my plate. The chef had prepared roast duck with a cherry reduction. It looked like a wound. I picked up my spoon to eat the soup. This was the moment. The curtain was rising on the second act of my performance. I let my hand tremble, not a lot, just enough to make the spoon rattle against the side of the bowl. Clink, clink, clink. I saw Sylvia's eyes dart toward my hand. She wasn't looking with concern. She was looking with clinical interest. She was checking to see if the poison was working. I lifted the spoon halfway to my mouth, then let my wrist go limp. The spoon fell. It hit the rim of the bowl with a loud clatter, sending a splash of pumpkin soup onto the pristine white tablecloth. "Oh, damn it," I muttered, my voice raspy and weak. I grabbed a napkin and dabbed ineffectually at the stain, making it worse. "I am sorry. My hand. It just gave out." Sylvia reached over and placed her hand on my arm. Her skin was cool. Her nails were painted a blood red. "Do not worry, darling. It is just a spill. You are tired. You have been working too hard on the wedding preparations." Blake took a sip of his wine, hiding a smirk behind the crystal glass. "Yeah, Clifford, you should really rest. Maybe you should go lie down before the main course." They wanted me gone. They wanted to talk strategy. But I wasn't going anywhere. I had a bomb to drop. I shook my head, pushing myself up in the chair with exaggerated effort. "No, I need to stay. I need to talk to you all, while I still have moments of clarity." The table went silent. Even the scraping of knives stopped. Jasmine looked up from her plate, her expression guarded. I looked at each of them. I let my eyes drift out of focus, then snap back, mimicking the symptoms of the drugs they thought I was taking. "This incident with the spoon," I said, gesturing to the mess, "and the dizziness I felt in the garage yesterday. It has made me think. The doctor said my heart is weak, but I think it is more than that. I feel my mind slipping, like sand through a sieve." Sylvia squeezed my arm. "Clifford, don't talk like that. You were just stressed." I pulled my arm away. "No, Sylvia, we have to be realistic. I built this family on reality, not dreams. And the reality is, I might not have much time left. Or worse, I might have time, but not my mind." I took a deep breath, preparing the lie that would expose their souls. "I have been thinking about the estate, about the money." I saw Blake lean forward. His hunger was so obvious it was pathetic. He looked like a dog waiting for a treat. And I realized something. I continued. "Wealth is a burden. It is a heavy weight. I worked 80 hours a week for 40 years. I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. And look at me. I am broken. I don't want that for you." I looked at Jasmine. I wanted to see a flicker of panic. I wanted to see her realize what I was doing. So, I decided. Tomorrow morning, I am calling Harold. I am going to restructure the will. I paused for effect. The silence was absolute. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. I am going to establish the Robinson Foundation for Inner City Youth. I am going to liquidate 90% of my assets. The properties, the stocks, the offshore accounts. It all goes to the foundation. I want to build schools. I want to build libraries. I want my legacy to be about giving back, not hoarding. I looked at them with a beatific, senile smile. "I will leave you the house, of course. and a small stipend, enough to live comfortably if you work. But the bulk of the fortune, it belongs to the world now. Crash. The sound came from my left. Blake had dropped his water glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, sending shards of crystal and water everywhere. He didn't even look down. His face was pale, his mouth hanging open. "What?" he choked out. His voice was an octave higher than usual. "What did you just say?" Sylvia was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. Her face had drained of color, leaving her rouge standing out like clown makeup. "Clifford, you are not serious," she whispered. "You can't be serious. 90%? That is insane. You are not thinking clearly. This is the medication talking." I looked at her, widening my eyes in feigned innocence. "But Sylvia, you always said we should be more charitable. You organize all those galas. Don't you want to help the children?" "I don't give a damn about the children," she snapped, then caught herself. "I mean, of course I do, but to give away everything? Clifford, you have a daughter, you have a wife, you have a future son-in-law. You have responsibilities to this family first. It is for your own good," I said, my voice trembling. "Money destroys families. I want to save you from the curse of greed." Blake stood up. He was shaking. He looked like he was about to punch me. "Sir, with all due respect, this is crazy. You can't just burn $50 million because you dropped a spoon. You need a doctor. You need a competency hearing." There it was, the threat. He was already moving to the insanity defense. I turned my head slowly toward Jasmine. This was the test. This was the moment of truth. If she was truly on my side, if she was truly trapping them, she would play along. She would say, "That is a noble idea, Dad." She would encourage it to make them panic further, or she would remain silent. But Jasmine didn't stay silent, and she didn't play along. She placed her knife and fork down on her plate with precise, deliberate movements. She picked up her napkin and dabbed the corners of her mouth. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were not the eyes of a daughter looking at a sick father. They were the eyes of a shark looking at a wounded seal. They were cold, dead, calculating. "Dad, stop it," she said. Her voice was ice. I blinked, genuinely surprised by her tone. "Jasmine, you are not giving the money to charity," she said flatly. "You are not liquidating the assets, and you are certainly not calling Harold tomorrow." "Why not, sweetheart?" I asked, keeping my voice wavering. "Don't you want to help people?" "I want to help this family," she said. "You built this empire for us, for me. You told me that every single day of my life. This is for you, Jasmine. This is your legacy. And now, because you are having a bad week, because you are feeling old, you want to throw it away?" She stood up. She looked tall, powerful, and terrifying. "You are not thinking clearly, Dad. Sylvia is right. Maybe it is the medication. Maybe it is the stress. But you are making irrational decisions. And as your daughter, as your heir, I cannot let you destroy this company." I felt a chill go down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She wasn't defending me. She wasn't worried that I was being drugged. She had heard me say, "I feel my mind slipping," the exact symptom of the poison she knew they were feeding me. And she didn't care. She didn't say, "Stop taking the pills." She didn't say, "Let's go to the hospital." She used my confusion as a weapon to argue for the money. She was agreeing with Blake and Sylvia. She was validating their narrative that I was incompetent. I looked at the three of them. Sylvia, looking relieved that Jasmine was attacking me. Blake, nodding vigorously. And Jasmine, leading the charge. It wasn't a trap for them. It was a trap for me. Jasmine didn't want to save me from the predators. She just wanted to be the one who took the biggest bite of the carcass. She knew about the poison. She knew about the affair. And she was using all of it to maneuver herself into the position of power. She didn't care if I lived or died, as long as the money didn't go to charity. I slumped back in my chair. I didn't have to act anymore. The defeat I felt was real. "I see," I whispered. "I see where we stand." Jasmine leaned over the table, her hands resting on the wood. "We are going to finish this dinner," she commanded. "Then you are going to go upstairs and rest. You are going to take your medicine. And we are never going to discuss this charity nonsense again. Do you understand me, Dad?" I looked at the pill bottle in Sylvia's purse. I looked at the broken glass on the floor. I looked at my daughter. "I understand," I said softly. I understood perfectly. I was alone in a room with three killers. One wanted my heart to stop, one wanted my brain to rot, and the third one? She just wanted the check to clear before the body got cold. I picked up my spoon again. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. It was steady as a rock, because now I knew exactly what I had to do, and mercy was no longer on the menu. I stared at the glowing screen of my burner phone until my eyes burned. The email from the private toxicology lab was short, clinical, and absolutely terrifying. I was sitting in my truck, parked 3 blocks away from my own house, huddled in the darkness like a criminal. But I wasn't the criminal. I was the target. I had sent the sample of the blue pill via courier yesterday morning under a false name. The report confirmed my worst fears, but it also revealed a level of sophistication I didn't think Sylvia possessed. The pill wasn't just a sedative. It was a cocktail of scopolamine and high-grade antipsychotics. The lab technician had added a note at the bottom. This combination is often referred to as a chemical lobotomy. Continued use will result in permanent cognitive decline, memory loss, and high suggestibility. I let the phone drop into my lap. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, hard rage that started in my gut and spread to my fingertips. They weren't just trying to kill me. Death would have been too kind. They were trying to erase me. They wanted to turn Clifford Robinson, the man who built skyscrapers and reshaped the Detroit skyline, into a drooling, obedient vegetable. They wanted me alive enough to sign checks, but too broken to know what I was signing. I thought about the last few weeks, the fog in my brain, the moments where I couldn't remember where I put my keys. I had thought it was age. I had thought it was stress, but it was them. Every morning, with a smile and a kiss, Sylvia had been feeding me poison, and my daughter, my own flesh and blood, knew about it. She knew they were melting my brain, and she was only concerned with securing the inheritance before the melting was complete. I started the engine of my truck. The rumble of the V8 gave me a moment of comfort. It was a real sound, a mechanical sound. I understood machines. I didn't understand monsters. I put the truck in gear and drove toward the city. I had a meeting to attend, and for the first time in my life, I was terrified of what my lawyer was going to tell me. I met Harold at a diner on 4th Street. It was the kind of place with sticky vinyl seats and coffee that tasted like battery acid. It was the kind of place where men in work boots ate breakfast before a 12-hour shift. I used to be one of those men. Now, I was a multi-millionaire hiding from his family in a booth in the back corner. Harold Stein was already there. He was wearing a rumpled suit and a tie that had seen better days. He looked tired. Harold had been my lawyer for 30 years. We had fought unions together. We had fought city zoning boards. We had fought frivolous lawsuits. But when I slid into the booth opposite him, I saw a look in his eyes I had never seen before. It was pity. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. He simply slid a thick manila envelope across the table. It sat between us like a loaded gun. "You were right, Cliff," Harold said, his voice low and gravelly. "I had my investigator pull the court filings from the county clerk this morning. They were sealed, but we have friends in low places." I looked at the envelope. "What is it, Harold? Divorce papers?" Harold shook his head slowly. "I wish it were divorce papers. If she filed for divorce, we could fight. We could drag it out for years. We could hide assets. This is much worse." He tapped the envelope with a stained fingernail. "This is a petition for an emergency conservatorship." I stared at him. I knew that word. I had seen it on the news with celebrity breakdowns, but I didn't understand how it applied to me. "Explain it to me," I said. "Like I am a bricklayer." Harold leaned in. "Sylvia has filed a motion claiming that you are suffering from rapid onset dementia and paranoid delusions. She has affidavits from 2 doctors. One is her cosmetic surgeon, and the other is a psychiatrist on her payroll who claims he evaluated you remotely. They are painting a picture of a man who is a danger to himself and his estate." He took a sip of his coffee, grimacing. "If the judge grants this, Cliff, you lose everything. Not just the money. You lose your rights. You can't hire a lawyer. You can't access your bank accounts. You can't drive a car. You can't even choose where you live. Sylvia becomes your legal guardian. She becomes the trustee of your life. She can put you in a facility, medicate you however she sees fit, and liquidate your assets to pay for your care." I felt the blood drain from my face. This was the master plan. This was why Blake had taunted me. This was why Jasmine had pushed me. They don't just want the money, I whispered. They want control. Harold nodded. It is the perfect crime. If you die, there is an autopsy. There are questions. But if you simply go crazy, that is a tragedy. A private family matter. Sylvia gets to play the grieving, devoted wife who is forced to take control of the family empire. And she gets to spend your money while you sit in a padded room wondering what day it is. I slammed my fist on the table. The silverware rattled. The waitress looked over, annoyed. I am not crazy, Harold, I hissed. I am the sanest man in this city. We go to the judge. We show him the toxicology report. We show him the video of them plotting. Harold held up a hand. We will, but we have a problem. The hearing is scheduled for Monday morning, the day after the wedding. I froze. Monday. That is the timeline, Harold said. They need one thing to seal the deal. The petition claims you are violent. They claim your dementia manifests in aggressive outbursts. To get an emergency order granted over the weekend, or to have you committed immediately, they need proof. They need a public incident. He looked me dead in the eye. They are going to provoke you, Cliff, at the wedding. They are going to push every button you have. They are going to insult you. They might even physically assault you. They want you to snap. They want you to throw a punch. They want you to scream. Because the moment you lose your temper in front of 200 witnesses, the police will be called. But not to arrest you for assault. They will be called to transport a mentally unstable elderly man to a psychiatric hold. I sat back against the vinyl seat. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place. The incident in the garage, the spoon at dinner, Blake's arrogance, Jasmine's coldness. It was all a script. They were poking the bear, waiting for the bear to roar so they could shoot it. If I punch Blake, I go to the asylum, I said. Harold nodded. If you scream at Sylvia, you go to the asylum. If you try to drag Jasmine off the altar, you go to the asylum. The police report will be the final nail in your coffin. Sylvia will hand it to the judge and say, "See, I told you he was dangerous, and you will never walk free again." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I had spent my life fighting. When someone pushed me, I pushed back harder. That was the Detroit way. That was the Robinson way. Now, my own instinct for survival was being used as a weapon against me. So what do? I asked. Do I just sit there and let them win? No, Harold said. You do the hardest thing a man like you can do. You do nothing. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, high-tech earpiece. You wear this. I will be in a van outside with a team of private security and 2 off-duty police officers I have hired. We are going to record everything, but you have to give us the evidence. You have to let them think their plan is working. You have to be the confused, docile old man right up until the moment the trap snaps shut on them. I looked at the tiny black device. It felt light in my hand, but I knew it carried the weight of my life. I have to act, I said. Harold nodded. You have to give the performance of your life, Cliff. You have to let them humiliate you. You have to let them mock you. You have to take it. Because if you crack, even for a second, Sylvia wins. And you will spend the rest of your life staring at a wall. I thought about the wedding, the guests, the speeches, the lies. I thought about seeing Blake kiss my daughter. I thought about Sylvia playing the blushing mother of the bride. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. I can do it, I said. I will be a stone. Harold signaled for the check. Good, because this isn't a wedding anymore, Cliff. It is a sting operation, and you are the bait. I walked out of the diner into the gray morning light. The city was waking up. People were going to work, oblivious to the war being fought in their midst. I got back into my truck. I looked at my hands. They were big, scarred hands. Hands that could crush a throat or lay a brick. For the next 48 hours, I had to keep these hands in my pockets. I had to swallow my pride. I had to let them think they had broken the stallion. I drove back toward the stone mansion. I wasn't going home. I was going back to the stage. And when the curtain fell, only one of us was going to be left standing. They wanted a crazy old man. I would give them a crazy old man. But they were going to learn the hard way that just because the lion is quiet doesn't mean he has lost his teeth. It just means he is waiting for you to put your head in his mouth. Saturday morning arrived with a gray, heavy sky that matched the weight in my stomach. The house was already buzzing with activity for the wedding, which was now only 48 hours away. Florists were carrying in massive arrangements of white lilies that smelled like a funeral home. Caterers were setting up tents in the backyard. Amidst this chaos, I was fighting a battle for my own sanity inside the walls of my own home. Harold had told me to expect provocation, but knowing it is coming does not make it easier to endure. The psychological warfare began before I even finished my first cup of coffee. I am a creature of habit. For 40 years, I have followed the same routine. I wake up at 6. I shower. I dress. I put my wallet, keys, and phone on the mahogany dresser by the door. I am a builder. Precision is my life. I do not lose things. But when I reached for my wallet that morning, it was gone. I patted my pockets. I checked the nightstand. I checked the bathroom counter. Nothing. A cold spike of adrenaline hit me. My driver's license was in there. My credit cards. But more importantly, my sanity was in there. I knew I had placed it on the dresser the night before. I remembered the sound of the leather hitting the wood. I walked out into the hallway. Sylvia was directing 2 men who were hanging a tapestry. She looked at me with that practiced look of concern that made my skin crawl. "What is wrong, Clifford? You look flushed." "My wallet," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I cannot find my wallet." She sighed a long, dramatic exhale that drew the attention of the workers. "Oh, Clifford, not again. We talked about this. You put it in the kitchen last night, remember? You were looking for ice cream." I stared at her. I had not eaten ice cream in 10 years because of my lactose intolerance. I had not been in the kitchen last night. I had been in the garage, discovering her plot to murder me. "I did not go to the kitchen, Sylvia," I said. She walked over and patted my cheek. Her hand felt like a branding iron. "Come on, darling, let us look together. You get so confused when you are tired." We walked into the kitchen. The housekeeper, Maria, was chopping vegetables. Maria had been with us for 5 years. I had paid for her son's dental surgery, but when she looked at me now, she did not see the man who helped her. She saw the man who signed her checks. She looked away nervously. Sylvia walked straight to the refrigerator and pulled the door open. There, sitting on top of a carton of milk, next to a tub of yogurt, was my brown leather wallet. "See?" Sylvia said, holding it up like a trophy. "You left it here when you were getting milk. Just like you left your keys in the laundry basket yesterday." I looked at the wallet. It was cold to the touch. The leather was stiff from the chill. I knew I had not put it there. I knew it with every fiber of my being. But as I stood there with the housekeeper watching and the florists passing by in the hallway, I felt the walls closing in. This was how they did it. They moved my things while I slept. They planted evidence of my decline. And then they acted as the benevolent caretakers. If I argued, if I screamed that she was a liar, I would look paranoid. I would look exactly like the angry dementia patient she described in her court petition. I forced my hand to stop shaking. I took the wallet. The cold leather burned my fingers. I must have forgotten, I stammered, playing my part. "I don't remember doing that." Sylvia smiled, a shark showing its teeth. "It is okay, darling. That is why I am here, to remember things for you." I walked away feeling a nausea that had nothing to do with my heart. They were stripping me of my reality. They were rewriting my history one misplaced object at a time. I decided to go to the library. I needed to get away from her eyes. I needed to be alone. I walked toward the grand staircase. The stairs were made of imported Italian marble, sleek, polished, and dangerous. I was halfway down the stairs holding the railing when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast. Heavy. It was Blake. He was jogging down the stairs whistling a tune. He looked vibrant and healthy, a stark contrast to the old man clinging to the banister. "Morning, Dad," he called out. His voice boomed in the acoustic space of the foyer. I tightened my grip on the railing. "Good morning, Blake." He came up beside me. He didn't pass me. He stayed right at my shoulder, invading my space. He smelled of expensive cologne and aggression. "You know, you really should use the elevator," he said, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Stairs are dangerous for men in your condition. One slip and snap. A broken hip is a death sentence at your age, Clifford." I kept my eyes forward. "I am fine, Blake," he laughed. "Are you? You look shaky. Let me help you." He reached out. I thought he was going to take my arm. Instead, his foot shot out. Subtle. Quick. He hooked his polished dress shoe behind my ankle just as I was taking a step. My foot caught. My balance shifted. Gravity took hold. For a terrifying second, I was weightless. I saw the marble floor rushing up to meet me. I saw my own death in the hard gray stone. I flailed my arms, gasping for air, but I didn't hit the floor. A hand clamped onto my upper arm. It wasn't a saving grip, it was a vice. Blake's fingers dug into my bicep, finding the space between the muscle and the bone, and squeezing with sadistic force. The pain was blinding. It radiated up to my neck and down to my fingertips. He yanked me back so hard my head snapped. "Whoa there," he shouted. His voice was suddenly loud, theatrical. "Dad, watch out!" He pulled me upright, but he didn't let go. He kept digging his thumb into my bruise, inflicting pain while pretending to support me. I gasped, trying to find my footing. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Dad, are you okay?" Blake yelled again, looking around to make sure he had an audience. "Sylvia! Jasmine! Come quick! Dad almost fell!" He leaned in close to my ear, his breath hot on my skin. "You clumsy old fool," he whispered. "Next time, I won't catch you. Next time, I will push." I stood there trembling. The physical pain in my arm was intense, but the rage in my chest was an inferno. I wanted to turn around and drive my fist into his perfect, smiling face. I wanted to shatter his teeth. I wanted to throw him over the railing and watch him break on the marble below. My right hand balled into a fist, my muscles tensed. I was a bricklayer. I still had power in these shoulders. I could hurt him. I could make him pay. I drew my arm back, ready to strike, and then I saw it. High up in the corner of the foyer ceiling, a tiny red light blinked. It was one of the security cameras Sylvia had installed last month. She said it was for burglars. Now I knew it was for me. If I hit him, if I struck my future son-in-law on the eve of his wedding, it would be on tape. They would have the perfect evidence. Exhibit A, the violent, unprovoked attack by Mr. Robinson. Harold's voice echoed in my head. "If you snap, Sylvia wins. You will never walk free again." I froze. My fist hovered in the air inches from his ribs. Blake saw it. He smirked. He knew I saw the camera. He was daring me. "Do it, old man. Do it and give me the keys to the kingdom." I looked at his face, the face of a man who thought he had checkmated me. I slowly unclenched my fist. I forced my fingers to open. I forced the rage down into the pit of my stomach, where it burned like swallowed acid. I sagged against the railing, making myself look smaller, weaker. "Thank you," I wheezed. My voice sounded broken even to my own ears. "Thank you, Blake. I tripped. My legs just gave out." Sylvia came running from the living room, Jasmine trailing behind her. "Oh my God!" Sylvia shrieked. "Is he hurt?" "He is fine," Blake said, putting on his hero face. "He stumbled. I caught him just in time." "He is getting worse, Sylvia. He can barely walk now." Jasmine looked at me. Her expression was unreadable. She looked at Blake's hand still gripping my arm. She saw the white knuckles. She knew he was hurting me. She said nothing. "Let us get him to the couch," Blake said. He hoisted me up, treating me like a sack of laundry. I let them lead me to the living room. I let them fuss over me. I let Sylvia bring me a glass of water with trembling hands. I sat there, surrounded by my enemies, feeling the bruise forming on my arm. But inside, my mind was clear, cold, sharp. They thought I was broken. They thought I was afraid. They were wrong. I hadn't refrained from hitting Blake because I was weak. I had refrained because I was waiting. I looked at the camera in the corner. Keep recording, I thought. Record everything. Because tomorrow when the truth comes out, that camera isn't going to be your witness. It is going to be your judge, and I will be the executioner. Sunday afternoon arrived, wrapped in a shroud of tension that was so thick I could taste it on my tongue. Sylvia had invited 3 of the most influential board members of the City Art Museum for high tea. This was her arena. She was trying to secure a chairmanship that would cement her status as the queen of high society. She needed to look perfect. She needed her house to look perfect. And she needed her husband to be a silent, elegant prop in the background. I sat in the wingback chair in the formal living room, wearing a charcoal gray suit that Sylvia had picked out. My hands were folded in my lap. To the outside world, I looked like a distinguished retired tycoon. But underneath the expensive Italian wool trousers, I was rigged for a demolition job. I was about to destroy the last shred of my dignity to save my life. I had spent the morning preparing. I had found an old hydration pack from my hiking days in the back of the closet. I filled it with warm water and mixed in a little yellow food coloring and a splash of vinegar for the smell. I taped the tube down my leg, securing the valve near my pocket. It was a crude device, a builder's solution, but it was the only weapon I had left. The guests arrived. Mrs. Vanderhoven and her 2 poodles, Mr. Sterling, the investment banker, and Mrs. Gable, the gossip columnist. They sat on the silk sofas sipping Earl Grey tea and nibbling on cucumber sandwiches. Sylvia was holding court, laughing that tinkling glass laugh of hers. "Clifford is doing much better today," Sylvia lied, patting my knee. "He has his good days and his bad days, but we are managing. We are so blessed to have the resources to care for him at home." Mrs. Vanderhoven peered at me over her spectacles. "It is so noble of you, Sylvia. Most women would have sent him to a facility by now." I stared blankly ahead, focusing on a spot on the wall. Inside, my heart was hammering against my ribs. This was it, the point of no return. If I did this, there was no going back. I would be the crazy old man forever in their eyes. But if I didn't do it, Sylvia would keep feeding me poison until I really was gone. I waited for a lull in the conversation. It came when Mr. Sterling asked about the upcoming charity gala. I stood up. My movement was abrupt, jerky. Sylvia looked up, her smile faltering slightly. "Clifford, darling, where are you going? Do you need to use the restroom?" I looked at her. I let my jaw go slack. I widened my eyes, mimicking the look of absolute confusion I had seen in my own father's eyes before he passed. I don't know," I mumbled. "The birds. Where are the birds?" Sylvia's face tightened. "Sit down, Clifford. We can look for the birds later." I took a step toward the center of the room, right onto the priceless Persian rug Sylvia had bought at auction last year. It cost more than my first house. I reached into my pocket and found the valve. I need to go," I said, my voice rising in panic. "Then go to the bathroom, darling," Sylvia hissed through her teeth, her eyes darting to her guests. I released the valve. The warm liquid flooded down my leg, soaking the gray wool of my trousers instantly. It pooled around my expensive leather shoes and began to spread onto the intricate patterns of the rug. The smell of vinegar and stale water hit the air, sharp and undeniable. I stood there looking down at the spreading dark stain. I let out a whimper, a sound of pure, pathetic helplessness. "Oh no," I whispered. "Oh no." It is raining inside. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of everyone's lungs. Mrs. Vanderhoven gasped, covering her mouth with a lace handkerchief. Mr. Sterling looked away, embarrassed. Mrs. Gable stared her eyes wide, memorizing every detail for her next column. Sylvia froze. For 3 seconds she just stared at the puddle. I saw the vein in her forehead pulse. I saw the mask of the perfect hostess crack and shatter. She wasn't looking at a sick husband. She was looking at a ruined rug and a ruined reputation. "Oh my God," Sylvia shrieked. "Clifford, what have you done?" She jumped up, knocking over the teapot. Hot tea splashed onto the table, but no one noticed. All eyes were on me and the dark stain spreading across the floor. I started to cry, fake sobbing tears that I forced out of my eyes through sheer will. "I am sorry," I wailed, wiping my nose on my sleeve. "I am sorry, Mommy. I didn't mean to." Calling her Mommy was the final touch. It infantilized me completely. It confirmed to everyone in that room that Clifford Robinson, the titan of industry, was gone. There was only a shell left. "Maria!" Sylvia screamed, her voice shrill and ugly. "Maria! Get towels! Get him out of here!" The guests stood up hurriedly, gathering their purses. "We should go," Mrs. Vanderhoven said, her voice dripping with pity and disgust. "You have your hands full, Sylvia. We will call you." "No, please stay," Sylvia begged, grabbing Mrs. Vanderhoven's arm. "He is just having an episode. It is the medication." But they were already moving toward the door, stepping wide around the puddle. The smell was filling the room. My performance was perfect. Maria, the housekeeper, ran in, her eyes wide. She grabbed my arm and began to pull me toward the stairs. I shuffled along, head down, listening to the front door close. As soon as the guests were gone, Sylvia turned on me. She didn't hit me. She didn't scream. She just looked at me with a cold, dead hatred that was far more terrifying. "You disgusting old animal," she hissed. "You did that on purpose." I stared at her, drooling slightly. "Who are you?" I asked. She stared at me, searching for a sign of deception, but I gave her nothing. I was a stone. Get him upstairs, she spat at Maria. Clean him up, and lock his door. If he comes out again before the wedding, I will fire you. I let Maria lead me away. As I climbed the stairs, I heard Sylvia kicking the furniture downstairs, screaming into the empty room. I had lost my dignity, yes, but I had won the narrative. Now she wasn't guarding a prisoner, she was babysitting a vegetable. And people get sloppy around vegetables. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the corner of my bedroom, wearing a pair of sweatpants and an old t-shirt. The door was unlocked. They hadn't bothered to lock it because they thought I was too confused to operate the handle. I sat in the armchair, staring out the window at the setting sun. I kept my body still, my face slack, but my ears were tuned to the frequency of a predator. They were in the hallway, Sylvia, Jasmine, and Blake. They weren't whispering anymore. Before the incident in the living room, they would huddle in corners. Now they stood right outside my open door, speaking in full volume. Why whisper when the only witness is a senile old man who wets himself? It is disgusting, Sylvia said. Did you smell it? I had to throw the rug out. $10,000, Jasmine. Ruined. He can't stay here, Jasmine said. Her voice was pragmatic, cold. Not for the wedding. We can't have him peeing on the altar, Mom. It is a liability. I agree, Blake chimed in. Look, we got the medical report from the incident today, right? Maria saw it. The guests saw it. That is enough for the emergency order. We call the judge tomorrow morning. We tell him Clifford Robinson is a biohazard. We get him committed by Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday afternoon. That was the deadline. I had less than 48 hours. What about the transfer? Sylvia asked. The notary is coming Monday morning. Can he sign the papers if he is... like this? Blake laughed. He can hold a pen, Sylvia. We just guide his hand. As long as the signature matches closely enough, the bank won't care. They just want the fees. Once the assets are transferred to the joint account, we put him in the van and drive him to Shady Acres. Or the glue factory. I don't care. They laughed. All three of them. A cruel bonding moment over the destruction of the man who fed them. I sat there watching a bird fly past the window. I didn't blink. I didn't react. I let their insults wash over me. Their arrogance was their weakness. They were so sure of their victory that they were handing me the ammunition I needed to shoot them down. Jasmine and Sylvia walked down the hall, their heels clicking on the hardwood. But Blake stayed behind. He walked into my room. He didn't knock. You don't knock for a dog. He walked over to where I was sitting. He had a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. Look at you, he said, taking a sip. The great Clifford Robinson, sitting in your diaper, staring at the sun. It is almost sad. Almost. I didn't move. I kept my breathing shallow. His phone rang. He pulled it out of his pocket. He looked at the screen, and his face changed. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a sharp, panicked fear. He walked over to the window, turning his back to me. He thought I was gone. He thought I was furniture. He answered the phone. Yeah, Rocco. I know what time it is. He paused, listening to the person on the other end. No, don't come to the house. Are you crazy? There are security guards everywhere. Listen to me. I have the money. It is done. I slowly, very slowly, moved my hand to my chest pocket. Inside was the digital recorder Harold had given me. It was small, sleek, and powerful. I pressed the record button. A tiny vibration told me it was live. Blake was pacing now, running his hand through his hair. 2 million. Yes, I know the number. I will have it Tuesday. We are doing the transfer Monday morning. The old man is signing the trust over to the holding company. As soon as the funds clear, I will wire you. He listened again. No, there won't be a problem. He is a vegetable, Rocco. His brain is cooked. I could put a crayon in his hand and he would sign his death warrant. Just call off your dogs. If I see one of your guys at the wedding, I swear. He stopped listening to a threat. Okay. Tuesday. 2 million plus the VIG. You will get it. Just give me 48 hours. He hung up the phone. He let out a long, shaky breath. He took a massive gulp of scotch, draining the glass. He turned around and looked at me. You better sign those papers tomorrow, old man, he whispered to me, because if you don't, my legs get broken. And if my legs get broken, I am going to make sure you stop breathing before I go down. He walked out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I sat there in the silence. I reached into my pocket and pressed the stop button. I had it. I had the confession. I had the motive. I had the proof that he was coercing me for criminal debts. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. They thought I was a puddle on the floor. They thought I was a decaying relic. But as I sat there in the twilight, I felt stronger than I had in 20 years. The water from the hydration pack had dried, but the fire in my belly was raging. They wanted a signature. Oh, I would give them a signature. But it wasn't going to be on a check. It was going to be on a police statement. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I looked at the old man staring back at me. Gray hair, wrinkled skin, sad eyes. "Good job, Cliff," I whispered to my reflection. "You make a very convincing victim. Now let us show them what a survivor looks like." I hid the recorder in the hollow leg of the armchair. Tomorrow was the notary. Tomorrow was the signing. And tomorrow, Clifford Robinson was going to wake up. The sun had gone down hours ago, leaving the stone mansion wrapped in a suffocating darkness. It was Sunday night, the night before the transfer, the night before they planned to sign my life away. I was sitting on the edge of the bed in the master suite. My arms hung limp at my sides, my head lolled forward. To the casual observer, I was a man whose batteries had run out, a shell, a husk. Sylvia was in the room with me. She was preparing me for bed. It is a strange and terrible thing to have the person who is plotting your demise unbutton your shirt. Her hands were efficient, but cold. She stripped the shirt from my back, not with the tenderness of a wife, but with the annoyance of a nurse finishing a double shift. She tossed my shirt into the hamper with a sigh of exhaustion. "You are heavy, Clifford," she muttered, pulling my arm through the sleeve of my pajamas. "You are dead weight. Do you know how hard it is to take care of you?" I said nothing. I let a little drool escape the corner of my mouth. I let my eyes drift around the room, unable to focus on her face. This was the hardest part of the performance, the surrender of dignity. But I needed her close. I needed her guard to be completely down, because I was about to whisper a poison into her ear that was far more deadly than the pills she had been feeding me. I knew Sylvia better than she knew herself. I knew she was greedy, yes. But her greed was driven by a deep-seated insecurity. She was terrified of aging. She was terrified of being replaced. She spent thousands a month on creams and treatments to keep time at bay. And she had a secret. Hidden behind the large vanity mirror in her dressing room was a wall safe. Not the main safe in the library that we shared. A private safe. She thought I didn't know about it. She thought the contractor she hired 10 years ago to install it had kept his mouth shut. But I am a builder. I know every hollow space in this house. I knew she kept her emergency cash there, her diamonds, the things she planned to take if she ever decided to leave me. And tonight, I was going to use that secret to tear her alliance apart. Sylvia pushed me back onto the pillows. "There, now go to sleep. Tomorrow is a big day. You need to be rested so you can hold a pen." She turned to walk away toward her dressing room. She was already mentally spending the money she would steal tomorrow. I made a sound, a low guttural moan. Sylvia stopped. "What is it now, Clifford?" I lifted a trembling hand, pointing vaguely toward the wall where her dressing room was. "The key," I mumbled. My voice was thick, slurpy. "The gold key." Sylvia froze. Her back went rigid. She turned around slowly. Her eyes were narrow, suspicious. "What did you say?" she asked, stepping back toward the bed. I rolled my head on the pillow, looking up at her with wide, confused eyes. "Jasmine," I whispered. "Jasmine took the gold key. From your purse." Sylvia's face lost its color. She leaned over me, her hands gripping the duvet. "What key, Clifford? What are you talking about?" "The key to the mirror," I said. "The secret place, behind the glass." I saw the panic ignite in her eyes. I had never mentioned the safe in 10 years. The fact that I knew about it terrified her. But the fact that I said Jasmine had the key terrified her more. "You were dreaming," she said, but her voice shook. "You were confused." "No," I whined like a child. "I saw them. In the hallway. Jasmine gave it to him. She gave it to Blake." I paused, letting the words sink in. I watched her process the information. Jasmine and Blake, her stepdaughter and her lover. She said you wouldn't notice. I continued letting the lies flow like dirty water. She said you were too old. She said you were slipping. Sylvia's grip on the duvet tightened until her knuckles were white. "What did they say, Clifford? Tell me." I closed my eyes, feigning exhaustion. "Blake laughed," I whispered. "He said, Once they get the money, they don't need the old hag anymore. He said they will put you in the home with me. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear Sylvia's breathing. It was fast, shallow. I had hit the bullseye. Old hag. That was the dagger. Blake was 27 years younger than her. She knew deep down that he was only with her for the lifestyle. But hearing it confirmed, hearing that he was plotting with Jasmine to discard her, played into her deepest, darkest fears. I opened one eye just a crack. Sylvia was standing over me, looking at nothing. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She looked like a statue carved from ice. "Are you sure, Clifford?" she whispered. "Are you sure you saw the key?" "Yes," I moaned. "The little gold one, with the ruby. That was the detail that sealed it. The key did have a tiny ruby chip in it. Only she knew that. She didn't say another word to me. She didn't tuck me in. She didn't turn off the light. She turned on her heel and marched toward her dressing room. Her steps were silent, but furious. I waited until she was gone. Then I smiled into my pillow. The seed was planted. But I hadn't just relied on words. A builder knows that a structure needs a physical foundation. Earlier that afternoon, while the house was chaotic with the aftermath of my accident in the living room, I had slipped into her dressing room for 30 seconds. I didn't open the safe. I didn't have the combination. But I didn't need to open it. I took a small metal file from my pocket, and I scratched the paint around the keyhole of the hidden panel. I made jagged, fresh marks. Marks that looked like someone had been trying to pry it open, or jimmy the lock in a hurry. I lay in bed, straining my ears. I heard the slide of the heavy mirror moving on its tracks. Then silence. She was looking at the safe. She was seeing the scratches. She was seeing the physical proof of my senile rambling. I imagined her standing there. The woman who thought she was the puppet master, suddenly realizing she might be a puppet. She would open the safe. She would count the cash. Even if nothing was missing, the scratches were enough. They proved intent. They proved that Blake and Jasmine had been there. And why would they be there? To check the inventory, to see how much she had hoarded, to plan their takeover. I heard the mirror slide back. Then I heard footsteps coming back into the bedroom. I closed my eyes and began to snore softly. Sylvia stood by the bed for a long time. I could feel her gaze on me. But this time she wasn't looking at me with contempt. She was looking at me as a source of information. I was the fly on the wall that nobody noticed. She walked over to the window where her phone was charging. I heard her pick it up. I heard her dial. She didn't speak immediately. Then her voice came low and venomous. "Blake, where are you?" A pause. "No, don't give me that. I want to see you. Now. Meet me in the library. Everyone else is asleep." She hung up. She grabbed her silk robe, wrapping it around herself like armor. She marched out of the room, slamming the door just hard enough to wake a normal sleeper, but not hard enough to wake a comatose old man. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, but I could see the path to victory clearly now. Sylvia was going to the library to confront Blake. She wouldn't accuse him outright. She was too smart for that. But she would look at him differently. She would look for the lies. And when you look for lies, you always find them. I sat up and poured myself a glass of water from the carafe on the nightstand. My hand was steady. The triangle of terror was breaking. Sylvia suspected Blake. Jasmine suspected Blake thanks to the file I dropped. And Blake thought he was the king of the world, coercing a senile old man. Tomorrow morning the notary would arrive. They expected a lamb to the slaughter. But the lamb had teeth, and the wolves were starting to turn on each other. I lay back down, pulling the duvet up to my chin. I needed to sleep. I needed my strength. Because tomorrow, I wasn't just signing papers. I was signing warrants. I thought about the scratches on the safe. A tiny detail. A few flakes of paint removed. But in construction, a hairline fracture is all it takes to bring down a cathedral. "Sleep well, Sylvia," I whispered to the empty room. "Because when you wake up, your boyfriend is going to look a lot less like a lover and a lot more like a thief. And there is nothing a woman like you hates more than being robbed." Monday morning arrived with the sterile brightness of an operating room. It was the day of the transfer, the day the notary was coming, the day my life's work was supposed to be signed over to a holding company controlled by 3 vultures. I sat at the kitchen island wearing my bathrobe. My hair was uncombed. I stared down at a bowl of lukewarm oatmeal. I hate oatmeal. It reminds me of wet cement. But Sylvia insisted I eat it. She said it was good for my digestion. I think she just liked watching me struggle with the spoon. Jasmine was standing by the coffee machine. She was dressed in a sharp black business suit. Her hair was pulled back so tight, it pulled at the corners of her eyes. She was tapping away on her phone, checking stock prices, or maybe confirming the wire transfer details. She looked like a CEO. She looked like a killer. I lifted the spoon. I let my hand tremble violently. The oatmeal sloshed over the side of the spoon and landed on my chin. It trickled down onto the collar of my robe. I let out a small, frustrated whimper. Jasmine looked up from her phone. Her eyes narrowed in disgust. She didn't see her father. She didn't see the man who paid for her Ivy League education. She saw a mess that needed to be cleaned up before the guests arrived. "For God's sake, Dad," she snapped. "Can you not feed yourself for 5 minutes?" She walked over and grabbed a paper napkin. She didn't wipe my face with love. She didn't wipe it with the gentleness of a daughter caring for an aging parent. She scrubbed my chin hard. Her nails dug into my skin through the paper. It felt like she was trying to sandblast a stain off a countertop. "Stop it, Jasmine," I mumbled, pulling my head back. "It hurts." "Then stop eating like a toddler," she hissed, throwing the dirty napkin onto the counter. "The notary will be here in an hour. I need you clean. I need you presentable. And I need you lucid enough to sign your name. Do not embarrass me today." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Underneath the expensive makeup and the designer suit, I saw a frightened little girl trying to play grown-up. She thought she was controlling the board. She thought she was the queen. But she was about to find out she was just a pawn. "I am sorry," I whispered. I wanted to see the pictures." Jasmine frowned. "What pictures?" "The ones the man gave me," I said. "What man, Dad?" I pointed a shaking finger toward the pile of mail sitting on the far end of the counter. It was mostly bills and catalogs, but tucked underneath a magazine was a thick manila envelope. Harold had slipped it into the mail stack yesterday, when he came to drop off some legitimate legal notices. Sylvia had ignored it because it looked like junk mail. Jasmine rolled her eyes. She walked over and grabbed the stack. She was looking for bank statements, not surprises. "This is just junk, Dad," she said, flipping through them. "Pottery barn, electric bill, life insurance." She stopped. She held the manila envelope. It had no return address, just my name, handwritten in block letters. "Open it," I said, my voice taking on a childish excitement. The man said it was a surprise. Jasmine ripped the envelope open. She pulled out the contents. It wasn't a letter. It was a stack of photographs, high-definition surveillance photos taken with a long lens. I watched her face as she looked at the first one. Her expression went from annoyance to confusion, then to shock. The first photo showed a small, modest house in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. It had a white picket fence, a tricycle on the lawn. It was the kind of house a blue-collar family lives in. The second photo showed a woman. She was not glamorous like Sylvia. She was not sharp like Jasmine. She was soft. She wore jeans and a t-shirt. She was kneeling in the garden planting flowers. She looked kind. The third photo was the kill shot. It showed the woman standing on the porch kissing a man. The man was holding a toddler in his arms. The man was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, but there was no mistaking that jawline. There was no mistaking that smile. It was Blake. And he wasn't looking at that woman the way he looked at Jasmine. He wasn't looking at her with dollar signs in his eyes. He was looking at her with love. Genuine, comfortable, boring love. Jasmine's hands started to shake. The papers rattled in the silent kitchen. "Who is this?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. I leaned forward, peering at the photo she was holding. "Look at the little boy," I said, pointing at the toddler in the picture. "He looks just like Blake, doesn't he? Same nose." Jasmine didn't answer. She flipped to the next document in the stack. It wasn't a photo. It was a photocopy of a birth certificate. Father, Blake Edward Anderson. Mother, Sarah Miller. Date of birth, 3 years ago. She flipped to the next page. A marriage license, dated 4 years ago. No record of divorce. I watched the color drain from my daughter's face. She looked like she had been punched in the gut. She gripped the counter for support. "He is married," she choked out. "He is married." I decided to twist the knife. I needed to break her arrogance completely. "Maybe that is his sister," I said innocently. "But why are they kissing?" Jasmine wasn't listening to me. Her mind was racing. She was doing the math. She thought she was the smart one. She thought she was using Blake to get my money, and then she would discard him. She thought she was the predator. But looking at those photos, she realized the truth. Blake wasn't playing her game. He was playing his own. He wasn't going to stay with her after he got the money. He wasn't going to help her run the company. He was going to take his cut and run. He was going to go back to Ohio, back to this soft woman and this little boy. He was going to use my money to build a life with his real family, while leaving Jasmine holding the bag for the fraud, the poisoning, and the elder abuse. She realized she wasn't a partner. She was a mark. She looked at the dates on the photos. The timestamp was from last week, 2 days before he arrived at our house for the wedding prep. He was there, she whispered. He told me he was in New York meeting investors. He was in Ohio, with her. I took a spoonful of cold oatmeal. It tasted like victory. He looks happy, I said. Happier than he looks here. He smiles real big in that picture. Shut up, Dad, Jasmine snapped. But there was no heat in it. She was broken. She dropped the photos onto the counter. She stared at the image of the little boy, the boy who looked exactly like Blake, the boy who was the rightful heir to the fortune Blake was trying to steal. She looked up at me. For a second, the mask slipped completely. I saw the daughter I used to know, the one who got her heart broken by her high school prom date. I saw the pain. I saw the humiliation. She realized that the man she was sleeping with, the man she was conspiring with, didn't love her. He didn't even like her. He was using her just like she was using me. But then the wall came back up. The hurt turned into something else. It turned into a cold, hard rage. She picked up the photos and shoved them back into the envelope. She shoved the envelope into her purse. She didn't cry. Jasmine Robinson doesn't cry. She smoothed her suit jacket. She checked her reflection in the microwave door. "Eat your oatmeal, Dad," she said. Her voice was flat, dead. "The notary is coming. We have business to do." She turned and walked out of the kitchen. She didn't go toward Blake's room. She went toward her office. I watched her go. I felt a pang of sadness. I had raised a monster who could look at proof of betrayal and not scream, but instead calculate her next move. But I also knew I had won. Jasmine wouldn't tell Blake she knew. That wasn't her style. She would wait. She would let him sign the papers. She would let him think he won, and then she would destroy him. But she didn't know that I was going to destroy them all first. I pushed the bowl of oatmeal away. Sylvia suspected Blake. Jasmine knew Blake was a fraud. And Blake was terrified of the loan sharks. The triangle was shattered. They were 3 scorpions in a bottle, and I was about to shake it. I stood up and poured the rest of the oatmeal down the sink. I washed my face. I looked in the mirror. "Showtime, Cliff," I whispered. I walked back to my room to get dressed for the signing. I chose my best suit, the navy blue one with the pinstripes. It was a power suit, a suit for a man who is in charge. They would think I was dressing up for my own funeral. They didn't know I was dressing for court. As I tied my tie, my hands were steady. The trembling was gone. The confusion was gone. I was Clifford Robinson, and today I was taking my house back. The afternoon sun was fighting a losing battle against the thick gray stone of the mansion. The notary had left hours ago. The papers were signed. The transfer of the trust was initiated, but it would not clear until tomorrow morning. That was the window. That was the kill zone. I found Blake in the billiards room practicing his break. He was wearing a polo shirt that cost more than my first car. He looked like a man who had already won the lottery. He was whistling. I stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on my cane. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I let my hand tremble against the doorframe. "Blake," I rasped. My voice sounded like dry leaves scraping together. He looked up, annoyance flashing across his face. He didn't hide it anymore. Why should he? I was just a signature to him now. "What do you want, Clifford? I am busy." "I need help," I whined. "The wine. For the rehearsal dinner," Sylvia said. Sylvia said I have to pick the vintage. Blake rolled his eyes. He set down his cue stick with a clatter. "Jesus Christ. Can't you ask the maid?" "It is heavy," I mumbled, pointing to the floor. "The cellar. I can't carry the boxes. Please, son." He sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of martyrdom. "Fine. Let us get this over with. But make it quick. I have calls to make." He walked past me, not offering an arm, not offering help. He expected me to shuffle behind him like a servant. And I did. I shuffled. I dragged my feet. But my mind was racing. We reached the heavy oak door of the wine cellar. I unlocked it with a fumbling hand. The air that rushed out was cool and smelled of damp earth and old oak. It was the smell of patience. Wine sits in the dark for decades, waiting to become something of value. I had only waited a week. We descended the stone steps. The cellar was dim, lit only by low-wattage bulbs in iron cages. It was a maze of floor-to-ceiling racks holding thousands of bottles. It was soundproof. We were 20 feet underground. No one could hear us scream. No one could hear a confession. Blake walked ahead, running his hand along the dusty bottles. "So which one is it, old man? The Bordeaux? The Cabernet? Let us grab it and go. This place gives me the creeps." I stopped walking. I stood near the center of the room, next to the tasting table. I didn't reach for a bottle. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a checkbook. I stood up straight. I locked my knees. I rolled my shoulders back, dropping the stoop of the invalid. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool air. "Blake," I said. My voice was not raspy. It was not weak. It was the voice that had commanded construction crews on skyscrapers. It was the voice that had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts. It was deep, resonant, and steady as a sledgehammer. He stopped. The change in my tone was so drastic it physically halted him. He turned around slowly, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What did you say?" I looked him dead in the eye. The fog in my gaze was gone. My eyes were clear, sharp, and cold. I said, "We need to talk." I ripped a check out of the book. I placed it on the tasting table. $500,000, I said. Cash, certified check. I can call the bank right now and authorize it. Blake stared at the check, then at me. He laughed, a nervous, uncertain sound. "What is this, Clifford? Did you forget your medication today?" "No, Blake. I am not forgetting anything. In fact, I am remembering everything. I remember you tripping me on the stairs. I remember the pills Sylvia is putting in my food. I remember the conversation you had with Rocco about the money you owe." Blake's face went pale. The arrogance drained out of him, leaving him looking like a frightened child. You know. I know everything," I said, stepping closer. "I know you are a fraud. I know you are broke. And I know you don't love my daughter." I pointed to the check. "So here is the offer. 500 grand. You take it, you get in your car, and you drive. You don't stop until you hit the state line. You call Jasmine and tell her you got cold feet. You disappear." Blake looked at the check. Then he looked at me. The shock on his face began to fade, replaced by something uglier, something darker. The predator was realizing he had been cornered, but he also realized he was younger, stronger, and I was still an old man alone in a cellar. He started to laugh. It wasn't a nervous laugh anymore. It was a deep belly laugh of pure amusement. 500,000, he choked out, wiping a tear from his eye. "You are offering me $500,000. He stepped toward me, invading my personal space. He loomed over me, using his height to intimidate. "Old man, do you have any idea how much you are worth?" 50 million, I said, standing my ground. "Exactly," Blake said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. 50 million. And by tomorrow morning, it will be under the control of the trust, a trust that I will control." He picked up the check and ripped it into confetti, letting the pieces fall to the cold stone floor. "You think you are clever because you stopped taking the pills for a day," he sneered. "It doesn't matter. The papers are signed. The process has started. Even if you run upstairs right now and tell everyone I am a bad guy, who are they going to believe? The distinguished young entrepreneur or the senile old man who pissed himself in front of the museum board yesterday?" I said nothing. I just watched him. I let his ego swell. I needed him to say it. I needed the full picture. "You can't do this to Jasmine," I said softly, goading him. "She loves you. She is your partner." "Partner." Blake spat the word out like it was poison. "Jasmine is a tool. She is a means to an end. She is arrogant. She is annoying. And she is desperate for approval. I will marry her. I will control the shares through her. And once I have stripped the assets, she can have a tragic accident. Or maybe she will just end up depressed and medicated, just like her father." My hand twitched. I wanted to strangle him, but I held back. "And Sylvia?" I asked. "Your lover." Blake laughed again, a cruel sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Sylvia is a corpse walking. She thinks we are running away together. She thinks she is going to be the queen of the Riviera. Please. She is 55 years old and high maintenance. Once I have the money, she goes into the cheapest nursing home I can find. I will let her rot there until she dies." He leaned in close, his face inches from mine. I could smell the coffee on his breath. "I am taking it all, Clifford. I am taking your house. I am taking your money. I am taking your legacy. And there is nothing you can do about it, because you are alone. You have no one." He poked me hard in the chest. "So keep your 500 grand. I am going to buy this house with your money, and I am going to turn this wine cellar into a game room. And every time I come down here, I will laugh about the day the great Clifford Robinson tried to bribe me with pocket change." I looked at him. I looked at the man who planned to murder my wife, destroy my daughter, and erase my existence. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. "You are right, Blake," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. "I am old, and maybe I can't stop you physically." I reached up and adjusted the collar of my shirt. "But I think you are underestimating the structural integrity of this family." Blake sneered. "Get out of my way, old man. I have a wedding to prepare for." He shoved past me, his shoulders slamming into mine, hard enough to make me stumble. He walked to the stairs, taking them two at a time, his energy high, his confidence soaring. I waited until the heavy oak door slammed shut at the top of the stairs. I stood alone in the silence of the cellar. I reached up to my chest. My fingers found the second button on my shirt. It was slightly larger than the others, a matte black finish. I pressed it. A tiny green light blinked once, confirming the recording had been saved. I pulled the earpiece from my pocket and put it in. "Harold, are you there?" Harold's voice came through crystal clear. "I am here, Cliff. We got it. We got it all. The video is perfect. The audio is studio quality. Jasmine is a tool. Sylvia is a corpse. I am taking it all." I let out a long breath, leaning against the tasting table. My legs felt weak now that the adrenaline was fading. "Is it enough, Harold?" "It is enough to put him away for extortion conspiracy and attempted fraud," Harold said. "It is enough to void the trust transfer. It is enough to bury him, Cliff." "Good," I said. I looked down at the torn pieces of the check on the floor. $500,000. It would have been the best deal he ever made. Now he was going to pay a price that money couldn't cover. I walked over to the rack and pulled out a bottle of 1982 Cabernet. It was the year I started my company. It was a good year. I didn't open it. I dusted it off and tucked it under my arm. I wasn't bringing wine for the rehearsal dinner. I was bringing the wrath of God. I climbed the stairs slowly. My hip hurried, but my heart felt lighter than it had in months. Blake thought he was walking into a wedding. He didn't know he was walking into an autopsy. And I was the one holding the scalpel. I opened the door to the main house. The sound of string quartet music drifted from the ballroom. The rehearsal was starting. I straightened my tie. I smoothed my jacket. I checked the camera button one last time. "Let us go celebrate," I whispered. I walked toward the music, ready to play my final scene. The confused old man was about to die, and the builder was about to tear the house down. The air in the private dining room of the stone mansion was so thick with tension, you could have cut it with a steak knife. It was Monday night, the rehearsal dinner. This was supposed to be the intimate gathering of family and close friends before the grand spectacle tomorrow. Instead, it felt like a gathering of mob bosses who were all planning to whack each other before dessert was served. I sat at the head of the table. I was wearing my tuxedo. Sylvia had insisted on it. She wanted me to look like a prop, a well-dressed mannequin to complete her family portrait. But I wasn't a mannequin. I was a bomb waiting to detonate. I looked around the table. It was a masterpiece of dysfunction. To my right sat Sylvia. She was wearing a blood-red gown and enough diamonds to feed a third-world country. But she wasn't looking at me. She was staring across the table at Blake. Her eyes were narrow slits of suspicion. Ever since I planted the lie about the key in the safe, she had been watching him. Every time he moved his hand, every time he checked his phone, she flinched. She was convinced he was robbing her blind. She was terrified that the young lover she bought was preparing to cash her out. To my left sat Jasmine. My daughter looked stunning in emerald green, but her face was pale. She was drinking wine faster than she was eating. She wasn't looking at Sylvia. She was looking at Blake. But it wasn't with love. It was with a cold, dead loathing. She had the photos in her purse, the photos of the wife and child in Ohio. Every time Blake smiled, every time he touched her hand, I saw Jasmine flinch. She was repulsed by him. She knew he was a fraud. She knew he was playing her, and she was hating herself for falling for it. And then there was Blake. He sat there at the foot of the table, drunk on expensive scotch and his own ego. He had no idea the walls were closing in. He thought Sylvia was just being moody. He thought Jasmine was just nervous about the wedding. And he thought I was a senile old fool who he had successfully bullied into submission. He was laughing too loud, telling jokes that weren't funny, and looking at his watch every 5 minutes. He was counting down the hours until the money hit his account. I took a sip of water. I watched them. The triangle of hate. They were all connected by greed, but divided by secrets. And I was the only one who knew the whole story. The first course was served. Lobster bisque. I picked up my spoon and let my hand shake. I let a little soup dribble down my chin. Sylvia sighed loudly. "Someone help him," she snapped at the waiter, "before he ruins the tuxedo." Blake chuckled. "Maybe we should get him a bib, Sylvia, or a trough." Jasmine slammed her wine glass down. "Shut up, Blake," she hissed. Blake looked surprised. "Whoa, easy, princess. Just having a little fun." "Don't call me princess," Jasmine spat. "And have some respect. He is still my father." Sylvia looked between them, confused by Jasmine's sudden defense of me. It wasn't defense, of course. It was just hatred of Blake spilling over. The dinner continued in this agonizing fashion. Knives scraped against plates. Eyes darted back and forth. It was a silent war. And then I saw the signal. We had just finished the main course. Sylvia looked at her watch. Then she looked toward the corner of the room where a man was standing. He wasn't a waiter. He was a short, balding man with sweaty skin and a cheap suit. Dr. Vane. He was a concierge doctor Sylvia used for things she didn't want on her medical record. Prescriptions for painkillers, diet pills, and apparently, tonight, he was here for me. Sylvia nodded at him, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement of her head. Dr. Vane stepped forward. He reached into his medical bag, which was sitting on a side chair. I watched him. My vision was sharp. My mind was clear. I saw the glint of silver, a syringe. He didn't fill it there. It was already filled, a clear liquid. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. They weren't going to wait for tomorrow. They weren't going to risk me making a scene at the wedding. They were going to sedate me tonight. Sylvia turned to me. Her voice became sickly sweet. "Clifford, darling, you look exhausted. Your face is so pale." "I am fine," I mumbled, clutching my napkin. "No, you are not," she said, placing a hand on my arm. Her grip was like iron. "Dr. Vane is here. He thinks you should have a little vitamin shot, something to help you sleep. We want you rested for tomorrow, right?" Blake looked over. "Yeah, Clifford, take the shot. Go to bed. We have real business to discuss." Dr. Vane walked up behind my chair. I could smell the rubbing alcohol. "Just a little pinch, Mr. Robinson," he said softly. "It will help you relax." I looked at the needle in his hand. It wasn't a vitamin shot. That much liquid would knock out a horse. If they injected me with that, I would wake up in a facility 3 days from now, drooling and incompetent. Or I wouldn't wake up at all. I looked at Jasmine. She saw the needle. She saw the fear in my eyes. "Dad," she whispered. But she didn't stop them. She looked away. She took another drink of wine. She hated Blake, but she still needed me out of the way to get the money. I was on my own. The doctor reached for my arm. "Mr. Robinson, please hold still." I had split seconds to act. I couldn't fight them. I was supposed to be frail. If I punched the doctor, I would prove I was violent, and they would commit me anyway. I needed a distraction. I needed something so repulsive, so chaotic that it would break their formation. I thought about the lobster bisque. I thought about the steak. I thought about the hatred I felt for these people. I let my body go limp. I slumped forward, hitting my chest against the table. Then I made a sound, a loud retching gag that echoed off the walls. "Oh God," Blake said, recoiling. "What is he doing?" I didn't just make a sound. I committed to the act. I stuck my finger down my throat under the cover of my napkin. I heaved. A torrent of half-digested lobster and wine erupted from my mouth. I aimed it. I didn't aim for the floor. I aimed for the centerpiece. The vomit sprayed across the table, coating the white flowers, splashing into the wine glasses, and landing with a wet slap on Sylvia's red dress. I groaned loudly, flailing my arms, knocking over the crystal water pitcher. It shattered, sending water and glass everywhere, mixing with the sickness. "Oh my God," Sylvia screamed, jumping up. Her dress was ruined. She looked at the stain in horror. I kept going. I dry-heaved loud, guttural sounds that made the doctor step back in disgust. "He is sick," Jasmine yelled, covering her mouth. "Get him out of here. It smells," Blake shouted, pushing his chair back so hard it fell over. "It smells like death." Jesus, Clifford. The room was in total chaos. The waiters were freezing, uncertain what to do. Sylvia was screaming about her dress. Blake was gagging. Dr. Vane was holding the needle, but he looked terrified to touch me, covered in my own filth. I slipped out of the chair. I fell to my knees on the carpet. I am dying," I wailed. "My stomach. It burns." "Get him to the bathroom," Sylvia shrieked, pointing at the waiters. "Get him out of my sight. Clean this up." 2 waiters rushed forward, grabbing my arms to lift me. I let them drag me toward the door. I hung my head, drooling, moaning, acting the part of the dying man. But as soon as we crossed the threshold into the hallway, out of sight of the dining room, I changed. I shook the waiters off. "I am fine," I said, standing up straight. My voice was suddenly clear, commanding. The waiters stared at me, stunned. "Where's the service exit?" I demanded. One of them pointed down the hall toward the kitchen, dumbfounded. I reached into my pocket and pulled out $200 bills. I shoved one into each of their hands. "You didn't see me run. You saw an old man stumble to the bathroom. Understand?" They looked at the money. They looked at me. They nodded. I turned and ran. I didn't shuffle. I sprinted. I ran with the legs of a 20-year-old. I ran past the kitchen, where the chefs were shouting orders. I pushed through the swinging doors. I burst out into the cool night air of the loading dock. The smell of vomit was on my jacket, but the air tasted like freedom. A black sedan was idling 50 feet away, under the shadow of an oak tree. The headlights flashed once. Harold. I ran toward the car. My tuxedo shoes slapped against the asphalt. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop. I reached the car and ripped the back door open. I dove inside. Harold was in the driver's seat. He looked back at me. "You look like hell, Cliff," he said. "And you smell worse." "Drive," I gasped, slamming the door. "Just drive." Harold gunned the engine. The car screeched away from the mansion, disappearing into the darkness of the long driveway. I looked back through the rear window. I saw the lights of the house. I saw the silhouette of Blake standing in the doorway, looking out, probably wondering where the hell the old man went. Let him wonder. I pulled a handkerchief from my pocket and wiped my mouth. "Did you get the recording?" Harold asked, keeping his eyes on the road. I patted my chest pocket. "I got it. And I got something better. I got away." Harold smiled grimly. "Good, because I have the police chief on speed dial. He is meeting us at my office." I leaned back in the leather seat. My heart was slowing down. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me exhausted, but I was safe. For the first time in months, I wasn't sleeping under the same roof as my executioners. Tomorrow was the wedding. They would be waiting for a victim. They would be waiting for a confused, sick old man to sign over his fortune. Instead, they were going to get Clifford Robinson. I closed my eyes. "See you at the altar, Blake," I whispered. "And bring your lawyer." Tuesday morning dawned with a sky so blue it looked artificial. The stone mansion had been transformed into a cathedral of white lilies and satin ribbons. 200 guests filled the rows of white chairs set up in the grand ballroom. These were the elite of the city, judges, senators, titans of industry. They were all there to witness the union of the Robinson and Anderson dynasties, but they were about to witness a demolition. I was not in the front row where the father of the bride should be. I was not walking my daughter down the aisle. According to the announcement Blake had made 5 minutes ago, I was currently in the intensive care unit at St. Mary's Hospital, fighting for my life after a sudden cardiac event. Blake stood at the altar looking like a Greek god in his tuxedo. He had practiced his sad face in the mirror, I was sure of it. He wiped a fake tear from his eye as he told the congregation that Clifford sent his blessings, but his heart just couldn't hold on. It was a masterful performance. He was positioning himself as the grieving son-in-law, ready to shoulder the burden of the empire. Jasmine stood beside him. She looked like a marble statue. Her face was devoid of color, devoid of emotion. She held her bouquet of white roses like a weapon. She knew Blake was a fraud because of the photos I gave her, but she was still going through with it. She thought she could outsmart him. She thought she could marry him, take his rights, and then destroy him. She was playing checkers while I was playing three-dimensional chess. The priest began the ceremony. His voice droned on about love and faithfulness and honesty. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Sylvia sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, playing the role of the distraught wife perfectly. She was probably mentally redecorating my office already. I watched it all from the choir balcony, hidden in the shadows of the organ pipes. I was the phantom of my own opera. Beside me stood Harold and a technician from his firm. The technician had his laptop plugged directly into the mansion's audio-visual system. The priest reached the part of the ceremony everyone waits for, the vows. Blake took Jasmine's hand. "I promise to love you," he said, his voice cracking with feigned emotion. "To honor you, to cherish you, for richer or for poorer." He squeezed her hand. He was thinking about the richer part. He was thinking about the $50 million he thought would transfer to his control the moment the rings were on. Jasmine hesitated. For a split second, I thought she might run. I thought the daughter I raised might have a spark of integrity left. But she didn't. She opened her mouth to speak. "I promise," she began. "Do it," I whispered to the technician. The technician hit the enter key. The massive crystal chandeliers overhead flickered once, twice, and then died. The ballroom was plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the candles lining the aisle. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sylvia stood up. "What is happening?" she hissed at a wedding planner. "Fix the lights." Then the sound system crackled. A high-pitched feedback whine pierced the air, causing guests to cover their ears. The large projection screen behind the altar, which was supposed to display a montage of childhood photos, suddenly blazed to life. But it wasn't a picture of Jasmine in pigtails. It was a grainy black and white video. The timestamp in the corner read, 3 days ago. The audio boomed through the high-quality speakers, echoing off the stone walls. "You are bad, Sylvia. What if the old man comes upstairs?" The crowd went silent, dead silent. On the screen, the image was unmistakable. It was my dressing room. It was Blake. And it was Sylvia. The guests watched in horrified fascination as the mother of the bride and the groom engaged in an act that was anything but maternal. The sounds of their breathing, the zipper, the giggles. It was amplified for everyone to hear. Sylvia screamed. It was a primal sound. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, waving her arms frantically. "Turn it off! It is a lie! It is a deep fake!" Blake stood at the altar, frozen. His face went from tan to chalk white in a heartbeat. He looked at the screen, then at the crowd. He tried to laugh. This is a sick joke," he stammered into his microphone. "Someone hacked the system." But the video changed. It cut to the wine cellar. The lighting was dim, but the faces were clear. It was me and Blake. "Jasmine is a tool." Blake's voice boomed out, clear and arrogant. "She is a means to an end. She is arrogant. She is annoying. And she is desperate for approval." I looked down at Jasmine. She dropped her bouquet. The flowers hit the floor with a soft thud. She stared up at the screen, watching the man she was about to marry call her a tool. She watched him strip her of her dignity in front of 200 people. "Once I have stripped the assets, she can have a tragic accident," the video, Blake continued. "Or maybe she will just end up depressed and medicated just like her father." The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was a threat. But I wasn't done. The final nail in the coffin was next. The video cut again. This time it was the garage view. Sylvia and Blake standing between the cars. "The chemist said if he takes 2 of these a day, mixed with his heart medication, it creates a chemical reaction," Sylvia's voice said. "His brain will turn to mush. We won't have to kill him, Blake. He will simply lose his mind." Pandemonium broke out. Chairs were knocked over. People were standing up, shouting, pointing. Mrs. Vanderhoven fainted in the second row. Sylvia collapsed into her chair, hiding her face in her hands. She knew. She knew there was no spinning this. There was no deep fake excuse that could explain the specific details of the poison. Blake looked like a trapped rat. He looked toward the side exit. He took a step to run. That was my cue. I signaled the technician to cut the feed. The screen went black. The lights slammed back on, blindingly bright. The double doors at the back of the ballroom boom open. I stepped through. I wasn't wearing a hospital gown. I wasn't in a wheelchair. I was wearing my navy pinstripe suit. I stood tall, my shoulders back, my chin up. I held my cane not for support, but like a scepter of judgment. Behind me walked Chief Miller, the head of the city police department, and 4 uniformed officers. A hush fell over the room. It started at the back and rolled forward like a wave until the only sound was the click of my shoes on the marble floor. I walked down the aisle. I looked at the faces of my friends, my business partners. They looked at me as if I were a ghost, returning from the grave to demand retribution. I reached the altar. I didn't look at Jasmine. I looked straight at Blake. "You forgot one thing, Blake," I said, my voice booming without a microphone. He stared at me, trembling. What? "You forgot to check the batteries in your microphone," I said, pointing to the screen. "And you forgot that this is my house. I built it. I wired it. And I see everything." "Cliff, listen," Blake stammered, holding up his hands. "It is not what it looks like. We were role-playing. It was a joke. I love your daughter." "I love your daughter too," a voice called out from the side entrance. Blake froze. His eyes bulged. A woman stepped out from behind a pillar. She was wearing a simple floral dress. She looked tired, but her eyes were fierce. Beside her, she held the hand of a 3-year-old boy who had Blake's nose and Blake's chin. It was Sarah, the wife from Ohio. "Blake," she said, walking toward him, "you told me you were in New York on business. You told me you were closing a deal to buy us a new house." Blake couldn't speak. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Sarah walked right up to him. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She reached back and slapped him across the face with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. "Where is my child support, Blake?" she asked calmly. That was the breaking point. Chief Miller stepped forward. "Blake Anderson, you are under arrest for bigamy, fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder." 2 officers grabbed Blake. He tried to pull away. "Don't touch me," he yelled. "Do you know who I am? I am going to be rich." "Not today, son," Chief Miller said, spinning him around and slamming the handcuffs onto his wrists. The click of the steel was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Other officers moved toward the front row. Sylvia looked up, her mascara running down her face, making her look like a melting gargoyle. "Mrs. Robinson, please stand up," an officer said. "You are also under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and elder abuse." "I didn't do it," Sylvia screamed as they pulled her up. "He forced me. Blake forced me. I was a victim." I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had shared a bed with for 10 years. "Save it for the judge, Sylvia," I said coldly. They dragged them out, the groom in his tuxedo and the mother of the bride in her red gown, both in cuffs, screaming accusations at each other as they were hauled down the aisle. They had walked up so proudly minutes ago. The guests watched in stunned silence. The wedding of the century had turned into the crime scene of the decade. I turned to Jasmine. She was still standing at the altar. She was alone. The space beside her was empty. The flowers lay at her feet. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were tears of sorrow or tears of defeat. "Dad," she whispered. I didn't know. I didn't know about the poison. I looked at her. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hug her and tell her it was going to be okay. But I remembered the garage tape. I remembered the dinner. I remembered her wiping the oatmeal off my face with disgust. "You knew enough, Jasmine," I said softly. I turned my back on her. I walked over to Sarah and the little boy. I knelt down. "I am sorry you had to see this," I said to her. She looked at me, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Thank you for the plane ticket, Mr. Robinson. Thank you for telling me the truth." I looked at the little boy. He stared back at me with innocent eyes. He was the only innocent person in this entire mess. "Come on," I said, standing up. "Let us get you some ice cream. I know a place that serves the best sundae in the city, and I promise, no one there will try to poison us." I took the little boy's hand. I walked back down the aisle, past the stunned guests, past the police, past my daughter who was sobbing on the altar. I walked out of the stone mansion and into the sunlight. The air was fresh. The birds were singing. I was 68 years old. I was single. I was alone. But for the first time in a long time, I was free. And that felt better than any $50 million trust fund. The flashing blue lights of the police cruisers reflected off the polished gray stone of the mansion walls, creating a strobe effect that felt like a nightmare disco. The wedding of the century had officially ended, not with a toast, but with a reading of rights. I stood on the front steps, watching the officers shove Blake into the back of a squad car. He was still wearing his tuxedo, but the bow tie hung loose around his neck like a noose. He wasn't screaming anymore. He was weeping. He looked small. He looked pathetic. He looked like exactly what he was, a con artist whose luck had finally run out. Sylvia was in the car behind him. She pressed her face against the glass, her makeup smeared into a mask of horror. She screamed something at me, but the soundproof glass swallowed her words. I didn't need to hear them. I knew what she was saying. She was blaming me. She was blaming Blake. She was blaming the world. A narcissist never blames the mirror. The guests were scattering like cockroaches when the kitchen light turns on. Valets were running back and forth, retrieving cars for senators and CEOs who wanted to distance themselves from the scandal as fast as possible. No one looked at me. No one shook my hand. I was the man who had just blown up his own life, and the fallout was radioactive. I turned away from the driveway and walked back into the ballroom. It was eerily quiet. The musicians had fled. The waiters were stripping the tablecloths, trying to salvage the expensive linens. In the center of the room, the 5-tier wedding cake stood untouched. It was a monument to a lie. Jasmine was sitting on the edge of the altar. She had kicked off her heels. Her expensive emerald dress was wrinkled. She held her head in her hands. She looked like a child who had been left behind at a carnival. I walked down the aisle toward her. My footsteps echoed in the empty, cavernous room. She looked up when she heard me. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in dark, jagged lines. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice was cracked and broken. I stopped 10 feet away from her. I didn't bridge the gap. That gap was a canyon now. "I didn't know about the poison," she said again, desperate to make me believe her. "I swear to you, I wanted the money, yes. I wanted to secure the company. But I never wanted you dead. You have to believe me." I looked at her. I looked for the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. I looked for the young woman I had taught to drive. But all I saw was the woman who had wiped oatmeal off my face with disgust earlier that morning. All I saw was the woman who had sat at the dinner table and watched them humiliate me and did nothing because she was calculating her share of the inheritance. "It doesn't matter, Jasmine," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of anger. "It matters to me," she cried, standing up and taking a step toward me. "Please, Dad, I am your daughter. I am all you have left. Don't let them take me too. Don't cut me out. We can rebuild. I can run the company. I learned from you." I raised my hand, stopping her in her tracks. "You did learn from me," I said. "You learned how to be ruthless. You learned how to spot a weakness. But you forgot the most important lesson I ever taught you. You don't build a foundation on sand, and you don't build a family on greed." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It was a note Harold had prepared for me. "I spoke to the district attorney," I said. "I told him you were a witness, not a co-conspirator. I told him you provided the evidence that helped catch Blake." Jasmine let out a sob of relief. "Thank you. Oh God, thank you, Dad." "I am not doing it for you," I said coldly. "I am doing it because I don't want the name Robinson dragged through a criminal trial more than it already has been. You are not going to prison, Jasmine." She took another step toward me, her arms open, ready to embrace me, ready to start the manipulation all over again. But I stepped back. "But there is a condition," I said. "Anything," she said, nodding frantically. "Anything you want." "You are fired," I said. She froze. "What?" "You are fired from the company. You are removed from the board, and you are removed from my will. Harold is drafting the new documents now. You will get a small stipend, enough to rent a modest apartment and buy groceries. But the trust fund is gone. The inheritance is gone. You are on your own." Jasmine stared at me, her mouth open in shock. "Dad, you can't. This is my life. I have nowhere to go." "You are young," I said. "You are smart. You have an Ivy League degree that I paid for. Go get a job. Go build something of your own. Go find out what $1 actually costs when you have to sweat for it." "Dad, please," she begged, falling to her knees. "I am your daughter." I looked down at her. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, a breaking of a heart that I didn't know could break any further. "I will always be your father, Jasmine," I said softly. "But you have lost the right to be my child." I turned around. I didn't look back. I heard her sobbing behind me, screaming my name, but I kept walking. I walked out of the ballroom, past the rotting wedding cake, and into the silence of the house. I found Harold in the library. He was sitting at my desk, a stack of documents in front of him. He looked up when I entered. He didn't smile. He knew what this cost me. "Is it done?" I asked, walking over to the wet bar and pouring myself a glass of water. "It is done," Harold said. "The police have the recording. The annulment papers are being filed. The restraining orders are in place." "And the house?" I asked, looking around the room at the mahogany bookshelves I had installed with my own hands. Harold tapped a thick document on the desk. "The real estate agent is ready to list it, but I have a standing offer from that developer you hate, the one who wants to bulldoze it and build condos." "Sell it," I said immediately. Harold raised an eyebrow. "Cliff, this is your masterpiece. You built this place stone by stone. You want him to tear it down." I looked at the walls. I saw the ghosts of the last 10 years. I saw Sylvia posing for magazines in the foyer. I saw Blake measuring the drapes. I saw Jasmine plotting in the corner. "It is not a masterpiece, Harold," I said, taking a sip of water. "It is a tomb. I built a beautiful cage for people who hated me. I don't want to see it standing. I don't want to drive past it and remember. Let him bulldoze it. Let him turn it into dust." I walked over to the desk. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. The weight of it felt familiar. It was a tool of creation and destruction. I signed the listing agreement. The ink flowed black and permanent. With that signature, I was homeless. I was $50 million richer, but I had nowhere to sleep tonight. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel panic. I felt light. I put the pen down. "What will you do now?" Cliff Harold asked, gathering the papers. "Where will you go?" "I don't know," I said. "And that is the best part." I walked upstairs one last time. I didn't go to the master bedroom. I went to the guest room, where I had been sleeping for the past week. I packed a single duffel bag. I took my work boots. I took my old denim jacket. I took the photo of my first wife, Jasmine's mother. I left the suits. I left the watches. I left the trappings of Clifford Robinson, the tycoon. I walked back down the stairs. The house was silent now. The air conditioning hummed a low, steady rhythm. It sounded like a machine that had been turned off and was slowly powering down. I walked out the front door. I left it unlocked. I didn't care who came in. There was nothing in there of value to me anymore. I walked past the luxury sedans parked in the driveway. The Mercedes, the Range Rover. They looked like shiny coffins. I walked around to the side of the garage. There, parked under a tarp, was my old Ford pickup. It was 20 years old. It had rust on the wheel wells. It smelled of oil and sawdust. I pulled the tarp off. The red paint was faded, but it was real. I opened the door and climbed in. The seat was cracked vinyl, but it molded to my back perfectly. I put the key in the ignition. It turned over with a roar, a loud, unrefined mechanical roar. The engine shook the frame. It was the heartbeat of a survivor. I shifted into gear and rolled down the driveway. I passed the gate where the police cars had been. I passed the manicured lawns I had paid a fortune to maintain. I looked in the rearview mirror. The stone mansion stood looming against the darkening sky. It looked cold, imposing, empty. I turned onto the main road and didn't look back. I drove toward the highway. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. I rolled down the window and let the wind hit my face. It blew away the smell of lilies and lies. I thought about Sarah and the little boy. I had set up a trust for the kid, anonymous. He wouldn't know it came from the man his father tried to kill. He would just know he had a chance. That was enough. I thought about Jasmine. Maybe one day she would understand. Maybe when she earned her first paycheck, she would call me. Or maybe she wouldn't. That was her story to write now. I turned on the radio. An old blues song filled the cab. People tell you that family is everything. They tell you that blood is thicker than water. They tell you that you have to forgive because you share a last name. They are lying. Blood is just biology. It is an accident of birth. Family is not about who you are related to. It is about who sits by your hospital bed when the money is gone. It is about who tells you the truth when you want to hear a lie. It is about loyalty. I had spent a lifetime building a fortune to buy a family. I thought I could purchase love with trust funds and mansions. All I bought were parasites. I looked at the road stretching out in front of me. I was 68 years old. My heart was scarred, but it was beating. My hands were empty, but they were free. I am Clifford Robinson. I am a builder. And tomorrow, I am going to start building something new. Not a house, not a company. I am going to build a life. A real one. I pressed the gas pedal. The old truck surged forward, eager for the miles ahead. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving me in the twilight. But I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I had lived in the dark for too long. Now, I was driving toward the dawn. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to walk away from people you loved to save yourself, let me know in the comments. Tell me where you are listening from. And remember, sometimes the hardest demolition job is your own life, but it is the only way to build something that lasts. Hit like and subscribe for more stories of truth and justice. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your foundation strong. I spent 40 years building skyscrapers, but I realized too late that I had built my own home on quicksand. I thought providing for my family was enough to earn their love, but I only earned their greed. The most important lesson I learned is that you cannot buy loyalty. Real family isn't about DNA, it is about character. Never let anyone make you feel like you are past your prime, or that your value is just a number in a bank account. Sometimes you have to burn the bridge to stop the enemy from following you, and that is okay, because peace is worth more than any inheritance. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice. Tell me in the comments if you would have forgiven Jasmine, or if you would have walked away like I did. I read every comment. Until next time, stay strong.